Hello everyone and welcome back. So today we are going to build this form builder application. So this is basically full stack application built with Next.js, a Clerk, and also we are going to use Prisma for the ORM and Shadcn for the UI. So let's try to see this simple application. So as you can see, we can sign in basically with Clerk. Of course, I'm going to log in with my Google account. Let's try to select my Google account here. Let's just click continue. So now as you can see, I'm logged in, so I can just click this dashboard. And then because this is the first time I log in, of course, there's no form, there's no response. Everything is just 0. So if I click view all form, as you can see, no form found. And then I can go back, for example, my dashboard here, and I can create form. So let's try to create form. I'm going to call this employee feedback form. I want to paste that on this title. And for the description, I also want to paste this text. For the question, basically we can add, we can remove, we can do how much question you want. It's just up to you. As you can see, if we have just one question, we get this error toast notification if I remove it. Great. So for the first question, I'm going to say, do you feel value at work? Right. Let's add another question. I'm going to put the text right here, paste that. And for the another one, I'm going to copy and just paste that. So now we have 3 questions, right? So let's try to click create form. And now as you can see, we on the detail of the form. And basically this is the share your form. So we can share this link with others to collect responses. And this is basically the question. We have just 3 questions, right? So let's try to copy this link. And then I'm going to open on another browser here. And as you can see, we can just give an answer for the question. So let's try to send, for example, the name. I'm going to say Chandev here for the email. Let's do Chan, or this is my email basically, at gmail.com. And then for the question, do you feel value at work? I want to say yes. And for the another thing, I'm going to say, which is one thing you would change in your workplace? I'm going to say more flexible working hours. And this rate for your work-life balance, I'm going to do excellent. Great. So now let's try to click submit response. And as you can see here, down here, we have the toast notification, right? And I can just close the browser. If I refresh, as you can see, we have the view responses right here. And we have one value. So let's click it. As you can see, this is basically from the Chandev with the email, with the question, and also the answer as well here. Pretty nice. Let's try to see. I'm going to check the response. This is basically the response. I can click a view. This is basically the view of the form. I can also delete that basically. But first, I like to maybe create another response, right? Copy that, open browser and paste that. Let's try to send, maybe I'm going to make this empty for the name and email because this is optional. For the first question, I'm going to say no. And for the second one, I'm going to do better office equipment. And then for the third question, I'm going to say good. All right, so let's submit the response. And as you can see, we have the those. And then let's close it. I'm going to refresh. So now we have 2 responses. If I click, as you can see, it will look like this. And if user not sending the name and email, as you can see, we have anonymous response right here. So this is basically what we're going to build. And of course, this is responsive. I think I'm not going to mention this is responsive or not, because on 2025, guys, it should be responsive. So that's what we're going to build, and let's get started. All right, so the first thing first, we are going to generate the brand new Next.js application. We can do npx create next app lattice, and for the app name, I'm going to say form builder app. Hit enter. I'm going to use TypeScript, ESLint, Tailwind CSS, source directory. I prefer say no, and app router say yes, turbo pack yes, import alias no. Okay, great, it's done. So now let's cd into that folder, form builder app, and I'm going to open that inside Visual Studio Code. So let's try to run npm run dev. And then I just want to open the, I think the first thing is going to be the layout.tsx. And I just want to change the title and also the description from this metadata. For the title, I'm gonna say, let's do form builder app. And for the description, let's do this text right here. Create and share custom form with ease. Save that. Let's open localhost 3000. And then now, of course, the title and the description will apply on this metadata. As you can see on the top right here, we have form builder app. Cool. So I think we're done with this layout. Let's go back to the page.tsx. This is basically the home. And I'm going to make it bigger, and let's try to basically just want to remove everything in here. So in here, I'm going to create a header. This header, I'm going to put a header for now, header like this, and add class name. Let's do background white. And then here, I just want to say main or something like that. Let's do class name. Let's do background, maybe blue 5D. So now let's save that and let's take a look what we have. I'm going to go back. As you can see, this is what we have. Right, let's go back here. I just want to try to make this display flex. And I'm going to say flex column because I'm going to put this main to the entire right here in the rest of the Hake screen. So I'm going to put the Hake, minimal Hake to screen. So now I'm going to say this one is going to be have flex one. As you can see, now main is like all the space right here. Right, this is the main, this is the header. So on the header, what I'm going to do, let's add this class name right here, background white, border bottom, border gray 200, and padding white to 4. Let's take a look. This is what we have. And also inside the header tag, I'm going to create another div. And inside it here, basically have the title of the app, which is, I'm going to say form builder. And also we have div. This is basically the sign in button. So I'm going to call this sign in for now, just like this. So let's do class name. I'm going to apply this container and also display flex, justify between to make this h1 and div have space between. Right, so let me go back here, and as you can see, now the title is right here and the sign in button is on the right side. Cool, so let's try link this h1 a little bit. H1, I'm going to say 2XL for the text. Let's do 2XL, and also the font, make it that bold. So basically for the button component and etc., I just want to use Shadcn to make it fast. So let's try to install it. npm npx Shadcn, I believe, Shadcn add latest init. Like this. Let's hit enter. It will install all the dependency we need. I'm going to select neutral and use -- force. All right, great. So now let's do npx Shadcn add maybe button for now. So we can use that button right here on the sign in. Let's try to use -- force, run it again. As you can see, now we have component folders and also UI folder. Inside that we have button component. So this button is basically, we can using that on the sign in right here. I'm gonna cut that out, and here I'm gonna say button, come from the UI. Let's put the sign in right here, save that. Now we have this beautiful button, of course. So after I install Shadcn, I get this error right here, cannot resolve Talin animate CSS. As you can see on the global.css, this is basically the package will import. But we get this error here, I believe, I'm not sure, but I think by default Shadcn is not automatically installed at that package. So let's try to do npm install as a dev dependency, Talin animate -css. So now hopefully it works. So I'm going to do npm run dev. And let's try open this localhost 3000, and here we go. Everything is fine. As you can see, the button is applied, the styling of the Shadcn button component. Let's add some title and description on this main. I'm gonna go back to page.tsx, and then here inside this div, let's do another div. Let's add a class name, and then here I'm gonna put this container mx auto padding x to 4 and padding y 20, and text is basically center. And inside here, I'm going to put a heading too. Let's put this text right here. Create custom forms with ease. And also I'm going to put a p tag, and also just put the random text right here. Paste that, build form, collect response, and analyze data all in one platform. Sound really good. So now let's try to copy the class name here for the heading 2. As you can see that we have a text for XL. For the medium and more, I basically increase the text to 6XL. The font is bold and I add margin bottom to 6. And also for the paragraph, I'm going to add this class name right here. Just paste that. This is basically text large. For the medium size, text will be XL. And the text gray 700 for the color, margin bottom 8, and maximal width to XL and MX auto to make this maximal width to the center. Let's try to see what happened. So this is basically how it look. And also down here, I'm gonna put the button. So this button should become from the UI folder. And then basically inside in here, I'm going to put link. Link should become from the next link. And then what I'm going to do, let's say create a form just like this. And we have href in here because this is link. When I click this link, it should be go to the /dashboard/form/create. Great. So I just want to specify this button should be as child because we put a link component inside the button. So that's why we put the as child props on that button. And the size, I just want to change that to large. Save that, and here we go. Okay, great. If I click, of course, now it is a blank page. So now I'm going to working with the authentication, and I'm going to use Clerk because this is a really simple way to basically working with authentication. Okay, so for the, you can sign up basically if you don't have an account on Clerk. So I already signed up with Google, and for the application name, I'm gonna put form builder. This is basically the preview when user trying to log in or sign up on your application. And I'm gonna put a Google and GitHub maybe. Yeah, I think it's fine. I'm gonna create application. So now we can select any framework that we are going to use. You can select React, Remix, Astro, and Expo, and etc. In this case, we are going to use Next.js. So let's try to install the package, Clerk/Next.js. I'm going to open a terminal. Let's open another terminal here. Just paste that and hit enter. Also, what we are going to do next, let's put the environment variable. I'm going to copy this one. On the root, I'm going to do .env, just paste that like so. And I just want to close this one. And then here we need to create the middleware.ts file. So let's put that on the root because I'm just using app directory. If you're using source, you have to put that inside a source, I believe. All right, so let's put that right here, middleware.ts. And then let's just copy all the content, paste that like so. So let's try to, I'm going to close this one. And then here, I'm going to just copy and paste the, I think first we have to wrapping our layout here with the Clerk provider. So let's go back to the layout.tsx. And here, basically, we need to wrapping that, what I'm doing should be Clerk provider. Just like that. Just put all the HTML tag here inside a Clerk provider. Great. So now let's close the layout, and now we can use all the component that we need. So basically, I just want to maybe copy all of this, right? Sign out and sign in right here. I'm gonna copy that and then paste that right here. So if users sign out, I just want to show a sign in button. So I'm going to use a sign in button right here with closing tag because I just want to put the button sign in here inside that component like this. I'm not going to use sign up button. Let's just close that. And also if users sign in, let's first import that. I'm not going to show user button in this case. I just want to show the user button on when I go to the dashboard page. But for now, I like to have like a button, and this button is basically should be have a child, and also we have link like this, and I'm gonna say dashboard. This link have a href. It's gonna be go through the dashboard. Okay, great. So now let's take a look. So now let's try to click the sign in button. If I click, as you can see, it will redirect me to this link, and now we can log in. And if I don't have an account, I can just sign up right here. All right, that's pretty cool. I just want to try to log in with Google, but before that, as you can see, I'm gonna go to the users, and then now it's absolutely no user yet. Let's try to log in. I'm gonna use Google. Let's click continue. As you can see now, we are successfully logged in because now we have this dashboard. As you can see right here on the code, basically, if I sign in, just show this button dashboard. And if I go back to dashboard Clerk, if I refresh, now we should have this one user that logged in. Pretty nice. The login functionality is done. I also want to make sure this create a form button. So let's go back right here. This button should be just available when I log in. So I'm going to wrapping that with sign in component from the Clerk. So if user not sign in, what I'm going to do, let's try to do sign out right here. Sign out. And basically, I just want to maybe copy this button right here, sign in button component, copy that and just paste that like so. And for the text, I'm going to change that to maybe get started. Save that. Let's go back. We cannot sign out, right? Because we don't have the button. Let me put that like this. User button, I believe, is come from the Clerk Next.js. Now we have this button. Okay, so I just want to try to show you if I sign out. Now as you can see, we have get started right here. Okay, pretty nice. Let's try to sign in, or maybe we can do that from the get started button. This will just do the same thing. Let's try to log in with Google, and here we go. We successfully log in. And yep, like I said, I'm not going to use user button in this home right here. So now let's create the dashboard page. Let's try to, we have the arrow here, just remove that, close everything. Now let's go to the app, create folder called dashboard. And inside that, I'm gonna create page.tsx. Let's create the dashboard component, RFC, and then for the name of the component, I'm gonna say dashboard. Here, basically, let's try to create first the simple UI in here. I'm gonna add class name space y26, and also inside this div, I'm gonna put another div, and inside it I have heading one that say welcome, let's say John, for example. And under the heading one, we have a p tag, and then I'm gonna say manage your forms and respond, just like this. And also let's try to add some class name in this heading one. I'm gonna say text 3XL. Also the font, let's make it bold. For the paragraph, let's do class name. And for the text, I'm gonna say gray 500. Let's do margin top 1. Save that. Let's take a look. Hopefully we have this beautiful dashboard. Okay, not really beautiful, but I think it's fine. So now let's create, I think I'm gonna create the header, right? The header for the dashboard. Here inside the components, I'm gonna create a folder called layout. So I'm gonna put all the layout things inside this layout folder. So let's go with header.tsx, RFC, change that with capital header, and then here we can just import that on this dashboard. Basically, we can import that in here, or I'm gonna create a layout basically inside the dashboard. So I'm gonna do layout.tsx. This is basically a layout for a specific dashboard page. So let's generate component RFC, and then I'm gonna change the name to, I think I'm gonna say dashboard layout. And then let's try to change the class name here. I'm gonna say minimal height to screen, and also the display flex, and then flex column basically. Great. And inside this div, I'm gonna put the header. Let's do header, and also we have the main component, main tag in here, and inside that we have to put the children basically. The children, it should be come from the props, so you can say children like this, and the type of these children, let's try to put that in here. The type of the children, I'm gonna say react.react node. Children does not access on type children react node. What? Oh, I'm typo in here. It should be children. For the main tag, I'm gonna say class name. The flex, I'm gonna say 1. And then I'm going to wrapping this inside a container, mx auto, and also the padding to 4. Save that. Let's take a look what we have. As you can see, we have this header right here, and all the main is basically inside a container, and this basically have this MX auto. So instead of using div tag, I'm going to use header tag. So let's do header like that. And inside in here, I'm going to put class name, background. I'm going to say background variable. And also I'm going to say border bottom, border B for border bottom. And inside that, let's just remove this header tag. I'm going to put div. This basically have class name, container, display flags, height to 16, item to center, justify to between, px4, and then the mx is basically auto. And inside in here, I'm gonna put a div. So let's try to put some link in here. So let's put link, come from the next link. And then in here, I'm gonna put the title of the app from builder. So the href is going to be into the /. And also we have another navigation in here. So I'm gonna say nav, and inside that we have link. So let's put a dashboard. Also, I'm gonna put my form. So let's go with this dashboard href into, I'm gonna say dashboard. And for the my form, it should be go to the, let me go to the dashboard /forms. Great, so let's take a look. This is gonna be look like. Let's try to styling this div a little bit. I'm gonna say class name, display flags, and also item center. Also, I'm gonna say gap between that children is gonna be 6. Great, so inside the form builder here, I'm gonna add class name. Let's do class name. The font is gonna be bold. Also, the text is basically 2XL. Save that, and here we go. And then for the navigation, I'm gonna say class name. This is basically hidden by default. And for the medium and more, I'm gonna say display flags, and then gap to I'm gonna say 6. So let's try to styling the, I think the dashboard right here. So let's do class name. So I'm gonna put this class name right here. The class name is basically same for the dashboard and also for the my forms right here. So I'm gonna say class name and just paste that class. Basically we have text mute foreground. When I hover that, the text change that to text foreground, and the transition is basically transition colors. So if I go back, as you can see, this is gonna be look like. And also what we need to put on the right side, basically the user button and also the create form button. So let's do that in here. I'm gonna say div. This div have a class name called, I'm gonna say display flags, item center, and also the gap between the item on the children is basically 4. Inside that we have the button. So let's do button, and this button here is basically have a child called a link. So let's do link, and then I'm gonna say create form, just like this. And then I'm gonna say href into the /dashboard/forms/create. And then I'm gonna say as child because we have children inside the button. So I'm gonna put as child props on this button component. And then the variant, I'm gonna say outline. Great. So under in here, I'm gonna put the user button. Come from the Clerk. Save that, and let's take a look what we have. As you can see, that's just pretty nice. We have the create button, create form, and then we also have this user button. As you can see, if I click, it will go back to the home page. If I click dashboard, it should be look like this. Great, it look nice. So the next thing is, if user not login, user cannot go to the dashboard. Let's go back to the documentation of the Clerk. So let's click, just make sure you click this Next.js, and I'm gonna show you the out function, and then scroll down here. As you can see, we can get the user ID using this await out. So first we need to change the component to async function component. I'm gonna do that inside the layout.tsx inside the dashboard. So here I'm gonna change the function to async, and then what I'm gonna do, let's just copy this one here, copy that, just paste that down here. Right, just make sure you import the out from the clerk/next.js/server, and then here we have the user ID and redirect to sign in. Great, so now we can just check that like so. We can check like If the user ID doesn't exist, just redirect user to the sign in. Just run the function. Okay, so let's try to do that. I'm going to log out, sign out, and then let's try to go to the dashboard component, dashboard page. And then as you can see, it just redirect me to the login because I'm not logged in, right? So let's try to log in. And here we go. We are successfully logged in right now. So now I'm going to create 3 cards in this dashboard. Let's go back, and under this div, I'm going to put another div, and let's do class name. And this basically have display grid. By default, the grid column is 1, but when on the medium and more, the grid column is 3 column. Inside in here, I'm going to say another div. So this is basically the card. So as you can see, we have the background white for the card. We have the rounded large, shadow, and padding 6, and also border. And we have the title, is basically inside the heading 2. And then also we have paragraph. This is basically a form count. So I'm going to put maybe 12 number for now. And we have a button, and inside that we have this link. If I click that, it will go to the dashboard/forms. I'm gonna save that so you can see the result. This is basically the result, just pretty simple. So yep, I just want to copy and paste this card, right? I'm gonna copy this one and paste that 2 more times. 1, 2, just like this. And for this second card, I'm gonna say total response. And also for the number, I'm gonna say, I don't know, maybe 100. For the total response, basically we don't have this button, so I just want to remove it. And for the third card, it's basically, I'm gonna change this to create new, just like this. And then the paragraph, I'm gonna say star building a new form, just like that. And also we have button, and then I just want to change the text on the link here into create form. So the link should be go to the dashboard/form/create. So let's try save, and this is basically the result. For this paragraph, it's too large, I think. So let's go back, and then let's just remove the font bold and text 3XL in here and change that to text gray 500. Saving that, and let's take a look how it's look. Pretty nice. So next I'm going to create another card for the resend form down here. So let's try to copy the class name here for the card. I just want to create another div right here. So let's do div, and then I'm gonna say class name to that styling, which is background white, rounded large, shadow, and padding 6, and also have border. And inside in here, I'm gonna put heading 2. And I'm gonna say resend form. Save that, and let's take a look. Here we go. And let's try styling. Let's try to styling this a little bit. Class name text to XL. Font, I'm gonna say medium, and also margin bottom to 4. Save that. Here we go. So let's create the list of the resend form. So I'm gonna go back in here, and then let's do div. I'm gonna say class name to space y to, I'm gonna say 4. And then inside in here, basically we have the data. So I'm gonna say div, and then let's do class name. And I just want to put the display flex, item center, justify between, and border bottom, and padding bottom also 4. And inside in here, we have a div for the title, and I have a div down here for the button. So let's try to working with the title in here. So I'm gonna put heading 3. We have, for example, maybe this is the title. Let's try to add some class name on the heading 3. I'm gonna say font into medium. And also down here, we have the paragraph of the form. So I'm gonna say p tag, and then let's say responses, and then let's say dot, let's say created on 21 April, maybe 2025, just like that. And also down here for another div down here, I'm gonna say class name to display flex, and then the gap. Let's create the button. So basically we have 2 button in here. So let's do button, and then inside the button we have link. Link should become from the next link, and we have the view. And also we have another button down here. I'm gonna call this responses. For the href of the view, I'm going to say href, I'm going to say slash dashboard slash form slash whatever the ID. For now, just say 1, 2, 3. And here I just want to put the href as well. This is basically the response. So I'm going to say slash ID slash the response. Save that, and it's going to be look like this. For example, we have to list. I just want to copy this one and paste that down here. As you can see, now we have to list. This is going to be the UI look like. All right, just remove the second one. Just have one data row now. Before we working with the form, as you can see, if I click create form, it will go to the form slash create, right? Basically, we need to first create this page right here. If I click view all form, it will go to slash forms, right? So we need to create this first, and then we can create the form slash create. Let's go back here. All right, so let's try to do inside the dashboard. We have forms, and then I'm gonna create the page.tsx. Let's do RFC. I'm gonna say form page just like this. So now let's try to access that. Click view all forms, and this is what we have. Okay, so let's start styling this a little bit. I'm gonna say last name space y to, let's say, 6. Also inside this div we have another div. Let's put heading 1, let's say my forms, and then we have also the paragraph that say create and manage your forms. For the heading 1, let's say class name into text 3XL and font bold. For the paragraph, I'm gonna say class name, the color I'm gonna change that to text gray, maybe 500. And also for the margin top, I'm gonna change that into 1. Save, and here we go. Under this title, basically we have the form list. For now, I just want to comment, let's say form list. Okay, just fine for now. Let's try to create the create form page. I'm gonna click that, and as you can see, we need to create the create form. Let's go back to form folders, and inside that we have to create folder, and inside that we need to create page.tsx. Okay, great. So let's do RFC. Change this component into create form page, just like this. So now we have the create form page. I'm going to add maximal width for the create form page right here. Maximal width into, I'm going to say 3XL, and make it at on center so I can do MX Auto, just like this. And inside that, I'm going to say another div. Let's create a class name called margin bottom. I'm going to say 6. And inside in here, let's go with heading 1. Let's say create new form. And under the heading 1, we have paragraph that say design your custom font. So for the heading 1, let's say class name to text 3XL to make it more bigger. And also the font, just make it bold. For the paragraph, let's do class name. Text, I'm going to say gray 500. And also margin top, I'm going to do 1. Margin top 1. Just like that. Save that. Let's take a look. All right, great. And now here we are going to create basically the form builder. So I'm going to create the form builder inside the component. So let's do component folder here, and I'm going to create folder called form. This is basically for all form components. I'm going to put that on the form folders. So inside in here, I'm going to create the form dash builder.tsx. We can do RFC. Let's change that to form builder, just like that. And now we can just import that down here. So we can do form builder. Nice. So now we can working with the form builder component. So first I'm going to create state called form. So this form is basically object. And inside that, first I think we need to import useState. Inside the form, we have a title. Okay. The title is empty string. We also have description. It is also string. And also we have questions. The question is basically an array. And then inside the array, we have an object. So this object is basically have ID. By default, I'm going to put 1. And also we have, let's say text. this is going to be empty string like that. And also I'm going to create the UI. So let's change the div right here into form. And then I just want to add class name. Let's do space y. I'm going to set that to 8. Also inside the form, I'm going to create another div. So inside this div, we have basically the label and input. So first, I like to just install the component from the Shadcn. So the first thing is I'm going to add label and then input and then text area component. So let's hit enter. Okay, great. So now let's run it again. And then let's go back here. Let's add label. So let's do label, and this label, it should be come from the UI/label. And then I'm gonna put this title like that. And also we have the input field, and this input we need to send couple props, of course. So we need to send the ID for the input is going to be title, and just make sure the label on the top right here have HTML4. I'm gonna say title. Okay, that's for the ID, and then we also have value. The value is going to become from form.title, right? Come from that state. And also I'm going to say on change event in here. So I'm going to say E. I grab the event and I can say set form. And then let's just grab all the default value for the form. And then for the title itself, I'm going to change that value into e.target.value. Also, we need to add placeholder here. Just say enter from title. And also I'm going to add class name. Let's do margin top to 1. Save that. Let's take a look what we have. The reason we get this error because we not specify this component should be client component. So let's do that. Use client on the top. Save that. And hopefully now we have this input field. So let's also add the description input field. So I just want to copy this div right here and then add the description down here. I'm going to change the label here to description. And also I want to put optional because this field is basically just optional field. Instead of using input, I'm going to use text area like that. And for the ID, I'm going to change that to description. Also HTML4 for the label, change that. The value should become from the description. And the on change event, I'm going to say description e.target.value. For the placeholder, I'm going to say enter from description. This should be form, not from. Just doing typo right here. Save and let's take a look. Okay. So basically we need to add space between the title and description. So here I'm going to say class name space y24. Save and here we go. So now let's see this div right here. I'm going to add another div like this. So I'm going to say class name space y2, let's do 6 in this case. And here I'm going to say div. Let's say inside this div, basically we have heading 3 and also we have button. So let's do questions. And also we have the button component. Let's import button. And then here we have add question text. Let's just styling this button a little bit. I'm going to say variant to outline. Variant to outline. The type of this button is just button type button. And also the heading 3, let's add class name. I'm going to say text to large. Also the font, this is going to be in medium. Save that. Let's take a look. So basically I like to put the question on the left and the add button question on the right side. So that's why in this div, I'm going to say class name, display flags, and also item center and justify between. Save and here we go. So we have the add question on the right and the question text on the left. So basically for the question input field, I'm going to make it dynamic based on the state right here, right? We can basically add new question, we can remove it and etc. So let's try to map through the form.question state right here. So this is basically still inside the space y6 right here, and I just want to map through that state. So I can say form.question.map. So I'm gonna get the question individual, and then here I'm gonna say index. So let's try to return JSX in here. So I'm gonna say div the key. I'm going to make sure the key should become from the question.id. And then here, I just want to add some class name on this div. So let's do class name, space y, I'm gonna say 2. Also the padding, let's say 4. Also the border. And then I add rounded and D for medium. So inside in here, let's create another div. So this div is basically have a label and button. So let's try to say label, just like that. And then here, I'm gonna say question, for example, question 1, question 2, question 3, and etc. Also, we have the button remove. So let's do button. And then here, the text, I'm gonna say remove. In this div, I'm gonna say class name, display flex, and item center, and also the justify between. Save that, and let's take a look what we have. I'm gonna go back, and as you can see, we have question 1 and also the remove button. Let's also styling that a little bit. For the remove, I'm gonna say class name. The text, I'm gonna set that to red 500 maybe. And also if I hover it, I also want to change the text into red 700. And also for the label, I think what I'm gonna do is I want to the one right here, the value should become from the index. So I can do like index plus 1 like this. And also in this label, I'm gonna put HTML4, and then I can put dynamic value in here. So I can say like maybe question let's just put the index. So I think I'm going to use a variant goes in this case. So let's do variant, and then let's do goes. I think this is much better. And I like to make that type to button. And also I like to make the size to just putting small right here. I think it's fine. So under the question 1 and under the remove, I'm going to put the text area. So basically under this div, I'm going to put the text area. So I can say text area, just like this. It should be self-closing tag. And then I'm going to put the ID. So the ID should be same like we're doing right here. I think I just want to copy that and paste that like so. And also we have another props value is going to become from the form dot question, or I think we can just grab that from the question because we mapped through that form right here. So we can do like question dot text, okay. And also we need to add on change event, on change set equals to, we grab the e, and then here what I'm gonna do for now, just put empty function like this. And also I'm gonna say placeholder, enter your question. Also class name margin top to 1. Save that. And here we go. So we have the question 1 and also the value. As you can see, if I typing something in here, it's not gonna work because we not handle the on change event. So now under the question here, I'm going to put button submit and button cancel. Let me go back here. I just want to zoom out a little bit. And as you can see on the form, we have basically this div. This is for title and description. We also have this div. This is basically for the question. And now after that, I'm going to create another div. This is basically for the button. So I'm going to say class name, display flex, and justify n to basically put all the element to the right side. And I'm going to say gap to 2. Inside in here, I'm going to say, let's say button. And then here I'm going to say cancel and also copy and paste. This is going to be the, I think I'm going to say save. Okay, so now let's just styling this a little bit. Cancel the type, I'm going to say button. variant, I'm going to do outline in this case. And also when I click that, I just want to run function in here. For now, just do empty function. So now let's go to the save button. So here, the type is going to be submit in this case. So I'm going to do submit, and then I think it's fine. So let's go back, and then as you can see, if I click, it will be reload the browser because the type of this button is submit. So when I click the save button, I like to run function. So I'm going to say on submit in here. If I submit the form or click the save button, I like to run the handle submit function. Just like this. So let's create that function on the top. Const handle submit set equals to arrow function. Just like this. So because I don't want the browser reload every time I click save or submit the form, I need to handle the event right here. So I'm gonna grab the E. The E is basically form event, just like this. So I can say like e.prevent default and just run that. And now every time I click save, the browser, it should not refresh. So now how we can make the question field dynamic. I'm going to make it bigger. That means if I click add question right here, it will adding new field for the question 2, for example. So we can do that. I'm going to go back first right here, and let's try to create another object. I'm going to call these 2. If I save, now as you can see, we have 2 questions, right? But I like to, this is going to be based on this add question button. So let's try to add on click event on this button add question right here. So I'm going to say on click. If I click the add question button, I'm going to run the function called add question, just like this. So let's create the function on the top. So I'm going to do const add question set equals to arrow function. So what I'm going to do in here is really simple. I'm going to say set form into, I'm going to grab the previous value, and then here I'm going to put an object. So basically I'm going to replace that form value on the state with new value right here. So I'm going to put the previous value from the form state, and then here I'm going to say questions. What I'm going to do on the right here is basically very simple. I'm going to grab the previous, we need to do a 3 dot basically, previous dot question, and then I'm going to add new object data in here. So I'm going to say ID, for example, 3 now. And then I also want to send the text. The text, it should be empty string. Just like this. So now let's try to add question. So if I click add question, as you can see now we have question 3. If I do that again, we have question 3, question 4, and etc. But as you can see, basically we get this error here because the key is same. Because we're doing the same ID right here. To generate random ID, I'm going to use UUID. So here I'm going to install it, npm install UUID, just like this, and hit enter. So now let's try to import that UUID on the top right here. So we can import the version 4 as a UUID version 4 from UUID. And then now we can just put that value on this ID like so and just run it. Really simple. So now let's do npm run dev again. Let's click the add question. As you can see, we have question 2 now, question 3, 4, 5, and then 6. It just works, but the button remove is not works. So let's try to make it works. I'm gonna go back to the where I put the button remove right here. So we need to just add on click event on this button remove on click set equals to. So in here, basically we need to run arrow function because we need to send the ID. So I'm going to say arrow function, and I'm going to call the remove question function and send the index. Just like this. The index, it should become from the index right here. So let's try to create the remove question function. So I'm going to do that in here. So let's say const remove question set equals to arrow function. This remove question is basically take an index as a parameter. So I can grab the index. The index is basically should be a number. I can do that like this. So here I'm gonna check first, okay, if the form dot question dot length is more than 1, because if we have just one length, there's no reason I remove the field, because by default it should always have one question. User cannot save if user not put any question right here. So the minimal question, it should be 1. So that's why here I add this condition. And then what I'm going to do here is let's set the form into, let's grab the previous form, and then I'm going to return object. Let's render all the previous value, and I'm going to say the question is going to be previous dot question dot filter. I'm going to filter that by, I'm going to put this underscore and then index. I just want to put E, for example. And then here, what I'm going to do, let's say if I is not equal to index, just remove that object. And else, let me do else right here. I'm going to say toast notification in here. Do toast notification. Okay, so let's try to remove, for example, this one right here. As you can see, now it just works. If I have just one question, I cannot remove it. Okay, it works. But now, as you can see, if I typing something inside the text area here, there is no value. So we don't yet handle that on change, I believe. So let's try to scroll down. And then this is basically the on change event. So what I'm going to do here, let's run function called handle question change. And in this function, I need to send parameter index, and also I need to send the value e.target.value. So let's create the handle question change function. Let's scroll up, and here I'm going to say const handle question change set equals to our function. So first I'm going to make sure we get the index in here. The index should be number, and also we have the value. The value, it should be string. So I'm going to create a variable called update question set equals to, I'm going to put all the form dot question in this update question variable. And then what I'm going to do is say update question dot index for the specific question we need to get. And then I'm going to change the text. So text set equals to, the new value is going to become from the value parameter. And then here I'm going to set the form back to, let me grab all the forms, and then it should be 3 dot. And then I also want to send the questions into the updated question here. Just like this, but we have an error here because I believe this is form, not forms. Just paste that right here and it just works. So let's try. I'm going to typing random something in here, 1 for example. As you can see, it works. If I add question 2, for example, let's add another question. I'm going to say 3. For example, I'm going to remove the question 2. What happened? Now we just have 1 and 3. It works pretty good. If I remove 1, now we just have 3. That's what I want. So now let's try to add the toast component. So I'm going to go to the Shadcn, and then let's try to looking for toast. This one right here, and let's try to copy that command back to the terminal. And then I just want to paste that npx Shadcn add lattice add toast. We get an warning here that say the toast component is deprecated. Use the sooner component instead. Okay, so we cannot use toast, but we can use sooner. This one right here. I think this is just same. Okay, let's try to use that. I'm gonna copy that command, go back to terminal, and then hit enter. So yes, I'm gonna use -- force. And how we can use that, let's scroll down. Basically, we need to just import the toaster into the layout. Still inside the body, basically. Yep. So let's try to copy that. Go back to layout. And then still inside the body, I'm going to put the toaster. It should become from the add component /UI/sooner. Let's run the npm run dev again. And also how we can run it. We can do like those and then the text. Okay, fine. So let's go back here, and then where I need to run the toast is basically right here. So let's try to say toast. I'm gonna say dot. As you can see, basically we can send a success or maybe error or maybe warning, I believe. Yep. So in this case, I'm gonna say error. For the text, I'm gonna put form must have at least one question. So let's try to click the remove. If I have just one question, click remove. As you can see, we have the those error down here. If I have, for example, 2, now if I click remove, of course we don't have that those error. Okay, so if we have just one question, if I click that, it just show the those notification down here. But I like to kind of like have a color. So on the layout, let's go back to where we render the toaster. I need to send props in here called rich color. So if I do that, magic will happen. So if I click this one, as you can see, now we have the red color. This is pretty nice. Okay, so let's go back again to the form builders, and what I'm gonna do next. So I think let's add just a little bit validation when I submit that right here. So I'm gonna do validate form, just like this, and here I'm gonna check if the form dot maybe title dot I'm going to trim. This is basically just remove all the space. If that is empty, what I'm gonna do is, let's say toast and then error. Here I'm gonna say title is required, and also just return nothing in here, just like that. So let's try to save. As you can see, we have title is required because the title here is field required. I'm gonna click that again. So now, of course, the submitted is running. But I also want to add validation for the question. I mean, the question, it should be have a text. So the way we do that is pretty simple. Here I'm gonna say cons empty question set equals to, I'm going to say form dot question. I'm going to map through that dot map, or I think I'm gonna use sum. And here I'm going to get the key for question. And then what I'm going to do is if the key dot text dot trim is empty, that means if I map through all the question in here, whatever the question is, and there is one question or two or whatever is empty, this is will true. So if this is true, what I'm going to do, let's say if the empty questions is true, I'm going to run the toaster right here. So I can say toast.error, and the text I'm going to do is remove it. All questions must have text, just like so. And then we need to just return down here, just like that. So now let's try to save. As you can see, all question must have text. If I click a lot of things, and we have all the error. And also I like to create state for submitting. If I click save, the submitting will be true, and we have kind of like saving or something like that on the button right here. So let's try to create the state on the top. So the state, I'm going to call this is submitting and set is submitting. So here I'm going to use try and catch inside the handle submit. So let's try to say try and catch. So inside the try, I'm going to set the is submitting to true, and inside the finally, what I'm going to do is set is submitting, it should be back to false. So let's do false right here, just like that. So now we can put the is submitting value inside. For example, I'm going to putting that on this button right here on the save button. So what I'm going to do is let's try to add condition. If the is submitting is true, I'm going to change the text here into maybe saving with 3 dot. Else, I think I'm going to say create form. And also I'm going to make sure this button here, it should be disabled when the is submitting to true, just like that. And also the cancel button as well, I'm gonna say it is gonna be disabled when the is submitting true. If I click cancel, I like to go back to the previous page. So I'm gonna use a router basically. So let's try to import the router on the top. So I'm gonna create variable called router and then set equals to use router. It should become from the next/navigation. And then we can run the router back on the back button. So let's try to scroll down on the cancel, I mean. So let's try to run that in here, router.back. So now let's try to just refresh first, and then I'm going to click cancel. As you can see, now we go back to the dashboard. If I go to form and then from here I create, and if I click cancel, it will be redirect me to the form. So now let's simulate the delay when I click the create form right here, because now nothing happened, right? If, as you can see, if I just fill all the input field, if I click this one, basically the text is not changed and the button is not disabled because the is submitting is not changed, right? So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say simulate the delay. So I'm going to use this await new promise, and then I'm going to use set timeout to 2000 millisecond. And then let's try to change the function here to async function. So now let's try it. I'm going to click create form. As you can see, now the button is disabled and also the text will be coming saving. That's what I want. Now let's try to install Prisma and set up that inside Next.js. So first I just want to close everything in here and let's open my Medium block. So this is basically step by step how you can install Prisma. So first we need to install the Prisma as a dev dependency, copy that command and then open terminal. Let's open another terminal right here. Just hit enter. Also, what we need to do next is we need to initialize the Prisma. Copy that command and then go back here, wait until it's done. Great. So now let's run the npx prisma init. This is basically will generate the Prisma folder, and inside that we have the schema.prisma. And as you can see, there's a new, I think this is the new version of Prisma because we have this output by default and it go to the lib generated and then Prisma. So it will generate the folder right here. So let's try to see what we need to do next. Let me scroll down and we need to specify the provider we need to use. Let's go back again here. And anyway, I'm not going to use PostgreSQL. First, I'm going to use, I think SQLite to make it this really simple. So now let's go to environment variables. And then I'm going to change the database URL. I'm going to set the database URL into file./dev.db, just like this. So now let's try to create the schema. So let's go back to the schema Prisma and I'm going to create the first model is going to be user. And this user should have an ID and the type of the ID is string, and by default I'm not going to put any value in here by default because this should come from the Clerk ID. And also we have an email. The email it should be not optional, this is a require, and this should be unique. And also we have the username, basically username, this should be optional. And then we don't have a password in this case. We have created add, update add, and also we have forms. So this form should come from the form model. So let's do form like this. And also we have form response. This should come from the form response like this. So let's try to create the form model. I'm going to copy this name. Let's do model form just like this. And we have an ID. It should be a string. I just want to remove this right here. So we have an ID string. And by default, I'm going to say default value should be not UID, but I'm going to use CUID just like this. Also, we have another field. It's going to be title. It should be string. And we have a description. The description, it should be an optional. And then we have a question just like this. The question, it should come from the questions a model, and also we have the responses. This should become from the form response, and we have the user ID. The user ID it should be string. It's basically come from this user model, and we are going to create the user. So let's do user. It should be come from the user model, and then the relation it should be come from the user ID here into the reference ID user. Great. So next we need to say create add and update add. I just want to copy this one and paste that like so. So now let's create the question. So form should be have question. Let's create a model. The model name, I'm going to say question, and then here I'm going to say the ID should be a string, and also this is have an ID and default is CUID. Also we have text, it should be string. We also have form ID. The form ID is also should be string. And then this is basically the relation. As you can see, the relation for this question inside a form model into this question model. So as you can see, the field is form ID, and then the reference is ID from this form model. Okay, and then next thing is let's create the answer. The answer is should become from the answer model, and then I'm gonna say order. The order I'm gonna say integer in this case, and let's create the create add and also the update add, just like that. Nice. So let's create the form response. So I'm gonna say model form response. So the first thing is we have an ID. The ID should be string, and the type of this is basically ID and default CUID. Also we have form ID. This is going to be string, and we have the relation right here. Because we put the form response inside the form, that's why in here we need to use also the form ID and also the relation form. Great. Also I'm gonna say answer in here should become from the answer model, and also we have the user ID, it should be string. Also we have the relation for the user ID, because as you can see here on the user we also put the form response. That's why in here we need to put also the user ID and user relation like that. Respondent email and also the respondent name, this should be an optional, and then we need to put created add and also updated add. Great. So let's try to create the answer. Let's do model, and I'm gonna call this answer, just like this. And we have an ID. By default we are gonna put this default CUID, just like this. And also we have text, this is basically string. And also we have question ID, this should be string. Well, wait, if I save and this automatically basically. So let's take a look. We have question ID. This is basically have relation with this question that we're typing right here on the model. We put answer. That's why in here we're using that question ID and also question relations. And also we have question ID. Why we have two question ID? I think I'm doing a typo right here. This should be question, just like this. And also after that we have the response ID. So let's do response ID. This should be a string. And also we have form response. This should be come from the form response that have relation for this form response right here, because we put answer. And also I'm gonna put the created add and updated add as well down here. So I think we're done with this schema.prisma. Let's take a look. What we need to do next is basically we need to run npx prisma generate. Let's just copy this command, and then we need to run it on the terminal, npx prisma generate. And also what we need to do next is we need to do npx prisma db push. Let's do npx prisma db push right here. And basically now we can run the npx prisma studio. So I'm gonna copy that and just run it like this. It will open the localhost 5555, and as you can see we have all the model. We have answer, form response, question, and user. Pretty nice. And the next thing is we need to install the Prisma client. So basically the newest version of a Prisma, I think we don't have to install a Prisma client. I'm going to update my blog on the Medium right here, but yeah, I'm going to do that later. So first, let's try to create I think we need to create this right here, db.ts inside a lib. Let's do that. Let's go to lib right here, and then I'm going to create a file called db.ts file, and then just copy all of this. Copy that, paste that right here. And yep, now we don't have to install the Prisma client because we can get the Prisma client from the generated /Prisma right here. So let's try to go to the dashboard app and then dashboard page. This is basically async, not async, right? I'm going to change this component into async. So let's change that to async like this. And let's try to maybe we are going to get the data. So I just want to copy this one right here for the block. I just want to paste that right here. And now we can just import the Prisma from the lib/db. And then as you can see, it's get all the user. But for now, we have no user. And I just expect that we have empty array on the terminal. I'm gonna say console log user. And now let's try to access the dashboard. And right here, just refresh it. It's still loading down here, as you can see. Okay, great. There's no error, pretty nice. Now let's take a look. As you can see down here, we have this empty array. That means we successfully connecting our Prisma with this Next.js. So now as you can see, basically on the dashboard Clerk users, we have this one user that login, right? But on the Prisma Studio, there is no user right here. So anyway, we can use basically webhooks to do that. I already showing you how to do that on my previous video. I'm going to put a link on the description, but it's take time basically. So in this video, I'm going to show you the easy way to synchronize data from the Clerk user into our Prisma. So the way we do that is let's try to create another file inside the lib right here. I'm going to create a file called, let's do Clerk sync.ts file, and then here I just want to export the async function. I'm gonna call this sync user with database and just remove this parameter. We don't need that. And inside in here we are going to use try and catch. So let's do try and then catch. So let's try to save this and let's go to page 4 from the dashboard. And in here I just want to try to let's just run the sync user with database function right here. So this basically sync user data whether they access the dashboard. Okay, so let's go back to the Clerk sync right here and let's try to do condition right here. So the first thing is I'm going to check if user login or not. So in here basically we can use cons and then I grab the user ID from the let's do await into the out function. Just like this, because we own the server component, of course we can using this Next.js/server. So what we can get in here is basically user ID, just like that. This is basically just return user ID, but how we can get the the detail of the user, like a name and first name and last name and etc., email and etc., we can get that inside the current user. So I'm going to say cons user set equals to await into the current user. It should become from the Next.js/server as well. Just do like this. And now if you want to see the value, you can just console log the user ID and also console log the user like this. Save that and let's try to see the value. As you can see on the console that we have, let me scroll up. This is basically user ID that have this value here, and also this is basically the user. As you can see, user have an ID, password enable, and etc. We have the image URL, we have the username right here. Username is null. We have the first name Chan, last name Dev, and etc. I believe we also have an email etc. right here. Okay, great. At least we get the data. So first thing first, we need to check if user not login. So I'm gonna say if there is no user ID or there is no user, I'm gonna say console error, no authenticated user found. And in here, I just want to return null, just like that. And here we're assuming that user login, right? So here I'm gonna say, just comment first. I'm gonna say assert user to database, and I'm gonna say cons db user set equals to await into the Prisma, and I'm gonna use dot user, just get the user table, and then here I'm gonna use function assert to basically add new data into the user table. So here I'm gonna send an object. Let's say first we need to specify where the ID is equal to user ID. So here I'm gonna say update. Let's do email into, I'm gonna get the user dot email address, and then I'm gonna get the empty first, not empty, I'm gonna get the first value on the array, and then here I'm gonna get the email addresses, or I'm gonna put empty string just like this. And also I'm gonna say username, it should become from the user.username, or I'm gonna get that from the user dot, let's do first name just like this, or just putting that user, I think is fine. So now here I'm gonna say create. So let's put the ID is equal to user ID, and also the email. I think the email and the username, I just want to paste that from the top right here. Just paste that. Here we go. And down here, finally, I just want to console log the user sync with database, and just console log this ID of the user and return db user. Let's try to do that. And here inside a catch, what I'm gonna do is just console error and returning null. So as you can see, I just console error syncing user with database, and just put the error variable come from the catch right here. So like that. Great. So now let's try to see what happened. As you can see here, this is basically running user sync with database, and this is basically the ID. So if you take a look now on the Prisma Studio, if I refresh, we should see one user right here, because we're on the dashboard page right now. And of course, this function right here is automatically run. And we also automatically run this assert user to database right here. That's why now we get new user right here. But again, I suggest you to use webhooks instead of using this function right here, right? Because this function is always running every time user access the dashboard of the app, right? Just using webhooks. I create a video on my last video. I'm going to put link on the description. So now what we need to working on is basically we are going to create API for create form, because as you can see right here, if I click create submit, nothing happened, right? There's no API post request in here. So let's try to create that API on the app/API folder. And then inside the API folder, I'm going to create also, let's create forms. And inside of forms, we have route. Let's do route.ts. This is basically will becoming the get request and also becoming post request. So now let's export the async function. I'm going to call this post request, just like this. And also here, I'm going to get the request. The type of this request, it should be a request, just like that. And here, I'm going to say cons. Basically, I'm going to get the user ID that login. So I'm going to say user ID. It should become from the await out. It should become from the clerk, like that. And down here, I'm going to say if there is no user ID, that means if user not login, of course, user cannot create a post, cannot create a form, right? So here I'm going to say return new next response, like that. And I'm going to put one string called unauthorized. And here I'm going to say status into, let's send 401, just like that. And down here, if user login, I'm going to get the title and also the description and also the questions come from the form basically. So that equals to await request .json. So I'm gonna say request.json like this. So now let's just try to, I think I just want to say return next response.json. Just put success through this is just for example. So let's try to make a post request. Let's go to the dashboard and then forms and then create and then page.tsx. And we need to open the form builder. So this is basically, we are going to handle that post request, which is inside the handle submit function. Of course, it should be inside this try right here. So here I'm going to say cons. Let's do response. So that equals to, I'm going to use await. I'm going to use just a fetch. Here I'm going to fetch into the /API /forms /forms, right? For the create that we already create here. Nice. So now we need to send an object, and here just make sure we specify the method. It should be post request, and also we need to send the headers. The headers, it should be an object here, and I'm gonna say content type into application/JSON. And now let's try to send the body. So the body, it should come from the JSON.stringify, and then we send the form. So as you can see, the form, it should be, let me go on the top. Form is basically have title, a description, and question. That's why on the road we can get the title, a description, and question from the request.json. So let's try to make a post request. If I do everything here and click inspect, go to the network, and now we should see the success response. As you can see, it's pending right here, and then we have this response here, success true. If I, for example, returning this value here, I'm going to paste that like so. Of course, now we get the value. As you can see here, we have the response right here. We have title, description, and question. If I add another question here, for example, 2, now I'm going to create, as you can see, we have 2 right here. It works great. So now what we're going to do is let's try to working with the Prisma in here so we can add new form inside our database. So before we run the Prisma, I just want to paste this simple validation. As you can see here, basically I just check if there's no title, that means user not send title. This is basically return this error right here that say title is required, status is 400. And if there's no question or the question.length is 0, I just want to return this, at least one question is required. Just really simple validation. So now we can put the data into the database using Prisma. So here I'm going to create variable called form. Set equals to, I'm going to use await, and then Prisma dot, I'm going to get specific table form in this case, and I'm going to use create. So inside of create, I'm going to specify the data that I'm going to send is basically title, set equals to title, and a description, set equals to description, and also user ID, it should become from the clerk. And also I'm going to send questions. So the questions is going to be used create in here, and then I'm going to basically map through the questions. So question from the request right here, I'm going to map through that. And here I'm going to say dot map, and then I'm going to get the for individual question, and also I'm going to get the index. And here I'm going to return object basically. So I'm going to say text. Text should become from the key, which is the individual question dot text. And also I'm going to make sure that I have order. The order, it should be the index like this. As you can see, we have this error because we don't specify the type of this key. So this key, it should be have text, and the text, it should be a string, and also the index, it should be just a number, just like that. And also we are going to return the form right down here. So we can say like return and next response, and then .json. I'm going to send this form just like this, but I like to the response is include the questions as well. So I can do like include. So here I'm going to say questions and just setting that to true. So now we get the question value on the form right here when we see the response on the network. So let's try to create a new form. So here, as you can see, we have this is the first example and etc. So I'm going to inspect. So we can see the requests down here. So let's try to click create form. As you can see here, this is a pending, and then everything is fine. If you take a look on the response, as you can see, we get all the response. And this is basically, let me take a look. As you can see, we include questions. That's why in here we also have the question array. As you can see, we have the order and the tags and etc. We also have the user ID here, title and description. So now I'm going to create maybe like a toast notification when the create form is success. So let's go back to the form builder, and here I'm going to say, first I'm going to check if the response, let's do response.ok is not true. What I'm going to do is say error set equals to await for the response.text like this. And then now I just want to throw new error and just put the error variable inside that, just like this. And also I'm going to create data. So let's do const and data set equals to await for the response.json like that. And now I'm going to make sure that I'm going to say toast.success in this case. And then I'm going to put text on the toast. I'm going to say form created, just like this. And also I'm going to send a description as well. So let's do object description. Let's send something like your form has been saved successfully. So after the toast notification show, I need to user redirect into the specific form detail. So here I'm going to basically create a router. We're already doing that. So I'm gonna do right here, let's say router dot push. I'm going to push user into the, let's use a backtick in here, and I'm gonna use slash dashboard slash forms and slash the ID of the form. So I can get that from the data.id, just like that. And then down here, I can say like router.refresh to make sure we have new data right here. Okay, everything should be fine right now. And the catch, yeah, we need to handle the catch. So I'm gonna say console.error. In here, I'm gonna say error saving form. And then we need to basically get the form error. So what the error, and we need to put in here. So the error, we can get that from the catch. So we can say error just like this, and then just render that right here. So I can say comma and then put the error just like that. And also for the user, I need to user can see this toast notification when something error, and the description says something went wrong while saving your form. Okay, great. So let's try to basically create another form. This is the title 2, and then I'm gonna create just the description. I'm not gonna send the description because this is optional. So let's send the question. Maybe what is this? I don't know. Let's try to create the form, and as you can see, form created successfully, and now it redirect user to the dashboard slash form slash the ID of the form. Really cool. We don't have that page, but fine, we are going to create that. But at least we have that data. If you go back to the Prisma Studio and then go back to form, as you can see, now we have 3 form basically. So now let's create the form detail page, which is this page right here. So as you can see, we're on the form slash ID. So now we can go back to the app and then dashboard, and then here we have forms. And then inside that, we need to create basically the form ID. So let's create a form ID. So I want to put that inside like an array in here because this is going to be dynamic. I'm going to put that like this, and then inside that, I'm going to create page.tsx. So let's do RFC, and then I'm going to change this to form detail page. So now let's try to save that, and hopefully it will render on the browser. And here we go. As you can see, we have the form detail page. So the first thing is I need to check if user login or not. If user not login, it will redirect user to the sign in page. So I believe there's an example in here on the layout from the dashboard. So I just want to copy this one, copy that and back that to the form detail page and just paste that like so. And of course, we need to import the out from the clerk. And then because we're using await in here, we need to make sure this component, it should be async component. So I like to just wrap all this div right here with this maximal width 3xl and mx auto, also space y to 6. And inside in here, we have a div. So this div here is basically kind of like the heading, because in here, I'm going to put the title on the left and also the button on the right side. And the button is basically have an edit button and view responses. So let's go back here, and then I'm going to add class name display flex in here, and also item center, and justify to between. Great. So inside in here, we have a div. This is for the title. Let me go with div. This is basically for the title, and we have another div for the button. Save that, and as you can see, we have the title and button right here. Now let's try to just create the title. So first, I'm going to create the heading one, and I think I just want to get the data from the database, so we can just directly styling that right here. So the first thing is, I believe we have to get that with Prisma, right? So we can say like cons, and then we can do form set equals to await. I'm going to use Prisma in here, and then dot form, and then here I'm going to say find unique, and then I'm going to specify where the ID, it should be have same with the form ID. So this form ID should become from the URL, as you can see right here, right? So how do we get that? It's pretty simple. So I can get the form ID inside the form detail page props in here. So I'm going to destructuring the params, and then I'm going to make sure the param, it should be have type plus 2 params, and then this is, it should be have let me do object, and inside in here I'm gonna put form ID, and this is should be a string like this. So now I can get that down here. So let's do cons, and then I'm gonna grab the form ID come from the params, just like this. And then here we go, and we apply that form ID right here. So now we have that form ID, and then we need to basically return also here. I'm going to return also the questions, and I'm going to order by, let's do order by order, and then I'm going to use ascending right here like that. And also down here, I also want to return the count of the response. So let's do select, and then I'm going to get the response and setting that to true. Great. So if I do console log form right here, so let's try to see right here. So I'm going to say console log forms, and then let's take a look on the terminal. As you can see, we have this data here. So basically we get this error. First, we need to fix that. As you can see, param should be await before using its property. So basically we need to await that. So I think we can say await in here, just like this. So I'm going to change this type of the params. Now I'm going to use promise. As you can see like this. Now the await, of course, is not error. Let's take a look on the terminal, and then I'm going to scroll down. As you can see right here, we have the ID, title, description, etc. We also have question, because we include the question right here, and order by ascending. Now, as you can see, we have one question, and then also we have the count of the response. Now we just have 0 response in this form. So let's try to render the title. So here we can say form.title basically. Let's render that in this heading one. So we can say form.title, just like this. Let's save, and hopefully we get that value. As you can see here, nice. So I think first on the top right here, I like to have some condition in here. As you can see, if the form doesn't exist, I like to user redirect to the dashboard/forms. And also, if the form.user ID is not equals to user.login, I like to user redirect to the dashboard/forms. So also in here, I'm going to check if we have the form.description value. Let's render this paragraph, because the description is optional. Of course, sometimes it's not have a value. So that's why in here we need to check that first. So now here we are going to render that if there is a value on the description, just like this. So let's add some class name in this heading one. So I'm going to say class name, text, I'm going to say 3XL. Also the font, let's make it bold. Also down here on the paragraph, I'm going to say class name. The text is going to be gray. Let's do gray 500. And also I'm going to add margin top to 1. Like this. Save that. Let's take a look. Okay, here we go. Now let's create the button. Here, I just want to remove this button, and inside in here, I'm going to create button component just like this, and we have edit, and also we have the view responses. Basically, I need to have gap between these two buttons, so I like to use just I can use flex and then gap to maybe 2, just like that. And inside the button, basically, I like to render a link. So I'm going to say link like this, come from the next/link. And then I'm going to put href right here. And the href is going to be go to /dashboard/form/form ID and then /edit. So here, because we set this as a children, I'm going to set this button that have as child like this. And also the variant, I'm going to change that to outline. And also for these view responses, I also want to use a link right here. And then just paste that text. Also, I'm going to put the href. So this is going to be into the dashboard/form/form ID and then /responses. And here I'm going to put the count of the response. So I'm going to say like this. Let's grab the form dot underscore count dot responses like that. So I also want to specify this should be as child. Great, let's take a look. As you can see, we have edit button and also we have view responses. Now it's 0 response. Nice. Also down here, I'm going to render maybe card. So I like to just install the card component from the Shadcn UI. So we can say npx Shadcn add letters add card and hit enter. So let's try to render the card down here. After this div right here, the display flex, I'm going to add another div basically. So this div it should be card like this. And then inside that I have the card header. Let's do card header like that. Inside the card header, basically we have the card title like this. And the title, I'm going to say share your form like this. Also, we have the card description, and I'm going to say share this link with others to collect responses. After that, we have the card content. Let's do card content. And then inside in here, basically, I just want to render p tag like that and put the form URL. So we don't have yet, so let's create on the top form URL set equals to, I'm going to use backtick in here. And basically, I'm going to create the public app URL environment variable. So let's go back in here. And let's try to remove all this comment right here. I'm going to create the, let's do next underscore public underscore app underscore URL. So if you upload your app here to the online, you have to change this public app URL basically. So in this case, I'm going to set that into http://localhost 3000. So this is basically what we are going to use. And let's try to import that right here. And as you can see, this is basically we'll get the process.env.nextPublicURL app URL or empty string. And then I adding this /form ID. That's basically form URL. So, and we paste that right here. So let's try to see how the result is gonna be look like this. So let's just try to make this a little bit better. So here on the paragraph tag, I'm gonna add class name and then put this padding, a border, rounded medium, and background gray 5D. So this is gonna be look like this. So we can copy this and share it to other people you want to get the response from your form. So after that, down here as well, we are going to create the questions. Let's do div. This div here is basically have class name call, I'm gonna say space y24. And also we have heading 2. Let's do questions like this. Let's add class name text to XL. Also, I'm gonna say the font, it should be bold. And also down here, we have a div that have last name space y22 as well. Because inside in here, I'm going to map through the question. So we can say like form.questions.map like so, and we can get the individual questions, and then also we can get the index. Here, what I'm going to do is just return card and just make sure we put the key in here. So the key should become from the question ID. So I'm going to say question.id like this. And then also I'm going to put the card content just like that. And then inside that I have paragraph. Let's just put the index +1. And also I'm going to say dot. And also here I'm going to say question.text. Let's just save that and let's take a look what happened. As you can see, this is basically the question. So for now we have just one question, right? Great. So in here, let's just try to make it better. I'm going to say class name to padding to 4. And then on the paragraph here, I'm going to say class name font medium. So now let's try to go back to the my form right here. Click that. We get the error. I believe we get something wrong with the URL here. So I think we need to go to the header component. So let's go to header component. And then I think I'm doing wrong right here. So the dashboard form, yep, I have typo. It should be dashboard, just like that. If I click, as you can see, we have my form right here. So now let's create the forms component right here so we can see the list of the form. So let's go back to the form/page, form/page, which is this component right here. So as you can see, we have the form list. So now I think in here, first we need to check if user login or not. First, I'm going to change this component to async component. And then I just want to copy and paste everything here, I think. Let's just copy that. And then just paste that down here. And then, of course, we don't need these params in this case. And out, we need to just import it just like this. So now, basically, we need to get all the form that available for the specific this user ID. So here, I'm going to say cons forms. This is basically, I'm going to get all the forms. So let's set equals to await for the Prisma, and then dot form dot find many. We get all of that. And then here we need to specify all the form from the user ID. So I'm going to use where the ID is equal to user ID. And then down here, I'm going to include also the count of the response. So I'm going to say count and then select the response. Just make sure you're setting that to true. And then I'm going to order by, let's say, created at into the scanning. So now let's try to create the form list component. I'm going to copy the name. Let's go back to component/forms. And then in here, we need to create the form list. So we can say form-list.tsx. Then we can do RFC, just change the component name to form list. And now we can just import that component in here. Let's do form list, just like that. And basically we need to send the forms into the form list. So we can say like forms set equals to forms. So now we can get that value from here, because in here we're sending these forms props on this form list. Of course, we can getting that in here. So we can say like forms like so. And then we need to specify the type of this. I'm going to say form list props. Let's create that type. I'm going to do on the top right here. So let's do type form list props set equals to an object. And then we have form. So this form, it should be have type form in array like this. So let's create the form type. I'm going to do that on the top. So here, let's do type form is going to set equals to object. We have an ID. The ID should be string. We also have title. Title should be also string. Also, we have description. Description, it should be string or null in this case. And also, I'm going to put the created at. It should be date type. And then we have the underscore count. should be have responses. So in this form list component, I like to have search functionality. So in here, I'm going to put a div, and then inside the div, I'm going to put an input component for the search functionality. So here, I'm going to send the placeholder, and I'm going to say search terms or search forms, just like this. And also we have the value. And I also like to send the value from the state in here. So basically, let's put search value. So let's create that search value state on the top right here. So I'm going to call this search value like that. And also, of course, we need to import the use state on the top and just make sure the type should be string. And by default, just empty string like that. Also, we have the onChange event in here. OnChange set equals to, we grab the event. And then here, I'm going to say set the search value into e.target.value. Because we're using a use state in this component, of course, we need to change this component from the server into the client using this use client on the top. Great. Also, I'm going to add class name, and I'm going to set the maximal width into small, just like that. And down here, we have the button. So let's put a button, and then inside that, we have a link. So this link, it should be have text create form. And I'm going to specify this button should be have as child. And then the href is going to be go to the /dashboard/form/create. And I'm doing typo again right here. Just change that. Here we go. Let's take a look. And as you can see, this is what we have. But I like to, this input field is still on the left, but the button create form is going to be on the right side. So here on this div, basically I'm going to add class name, display flags, and then also the justify to between. Okay, nice. And also I like to basically render the I think the form. So before I render that, I like to just add condition first in here. So I'm going to say if the form dot length is equal to 0, that means we don't have any forms in here. So I just want to return, let me do right here, or else I'm going to do down here. So first let's do with the form 0. So here I'm going to render a div, and then inside that we have p tag with this text right here, no form found, create your first form. So here I'm going to say class name into text center, and also the padding y into, let's do 8. And then in this p tag, I'm going to add class name as well. Let's do text gray into, let's say 500. It's going to be 500 like that. And for the form that have a value, I'm going to do div. So this one is basically will render another component called form card. So I'm going to do form card like this. So let's add a class name in here. So basically I'm going to add display grid in here. So let's do display grid. By default, we have just one column, but for the small and more, I'm going to set that to 2, grid column 2. And for the large and more, I'm going to set that to 3. And then the gap between the item, I'm going to say 6. Okay, saving that, and let's take a look. This is what we have because now we don't have any form. But I think I'm doing something wrong in here because this user that login should have forms. Because as you can see on this database right here, this user, Chan right here, have 3 forms. But we see in here no form found. So there's something wrong. So let's go back in here, and the forms here is basically come from the parent, which is from this page right here instead of form/page.tsx, right? So let's try to just console log this form. Just make sure this is empty array. So let's take a look here. As you can see, this is empty array basically. So that's why we don't get any value. So I think there's something problem with this, I think inside in here. So let's take a look. Find many where ID equals to user ID. So basically this ID is basically form ID. If I go back in here, as you can see on the form, we have an ID. So we just check this ID basically. But what we need to check is basically the user ID, not the ID, right? So let's go back in here, and I just want to change this ID to user ID like this, because we have same name. Just remove the second one, and this basically just do the same thing. So now if I go back and let's try to console log the forms, and hopefully now we get that value. So I'm going to say console log forms, and as you can see, basically we have 3 forms right here. Okay, so now because we have 3 forms, and of course now this condition will render, right? It will render heading 1 with form card. As you can see, let me see right here. All right, we have this form card. If I do, for example, a lot of form card right here, of course we will get the 3 column. As you can see right here, we have the 1, 2, and then 3 columns. So now let's try to create the form card component. So let's go to the components folder and form. Inside the form folder, I'm going to create a file called form card, form-card.tsx. And inside in here, I'm going to do rfc. Let's change the file to form card, the component name. And then I want to just render that inside a form list. So basically, I'm going to map through the forms in here. So I can say like forms.map. I get the individual form. And then here, I just want to return that form card, just like this. And of course, we need to send the key. Key should be form dot, we are going to use ID. Great. So now the form card will be rendered, and this is what we have. Great. So let's dial in the form card. So basically, there's a couple props that we need to send in this form card. Let's go back to list, and then we need to send basically the ID. ID should be form ID, and then we have title and description and response count, and also we have created at. All right. So let's try to get all that value into the form card component. So first, of course, we are going to create the type of the props. So let's create type called form card props. Set equals to object, and in here I'm going to specify the ID. It should be string, and also we have title. It should be string. Also, we have description. This is also a string or null. But I'm gonna make sure the description is basically optional. So let's add question mark in here. And then let's send also the responses count. This should be number. Also the created at. This is basically date type. Great. So now let's try to get all that right here. So we need to get the ID, we need to get the title, and etc. This is basically have type. I'm gonna put in here form card props, just like that. So now we can get the description, the response count. We also can get the created at. So basically in here, I'm going to return card component. So let's do card like that. And then in this card, I'm gonna add class name called Hake to full. Also display flags, and then flags column. So inside of card right here, I'm going to do the card header and also the card content. So let's do down here. So inside the card header, I'm going to put the card title. So let's do card title just like that. And I'm going to put the title in here. And also let's add the class name into the, I'm going to do run cat like that. And then also for the description, I'm going to putting that on the card description. But first, I'm going to check first if the description have a value, because this is optional, right? So we need to check that if there's a have value or not. So if description have a value, I'm going to return this card description, and then just put that description inside that like this. And also I'm going to add class name. Let's do line clam. I'm going to do 2. All right. Also for the card content, I'm going to do just make sure I add class name called flex1. And inside in here, I'm going to do b tag, let's say response. So in the front of the response text, I'm going to put this response count variable. So let's try to see. As you can see here, you have the title and also the response right here, and all of that now we have just 0 response. Great. So now let's try to render the date down here. I'm going to first format the date. So here I'm going to say cons. I'm going to call this formatted date, new date. And then here I'm going to send the created at dot to local date string, just like that. And now we can use the formatted date right here. So I'm going to render that still inside of from content basically. And here I'm going to say p tag. So let's render the formatted data, right? And then here on the front of that, I'm going to say created colon and the value of format date. Let's take a look what we have. And here we go. Let's try to just styling this a little bit. I'm going to make sure this created here, it should be have class name text small. Also the text gray, I'm going to make sure this is a 500. Save that and here we go. Also for the response right here, let's also add class name. And I think I just want to copy this style right here, paste that on the top. And here we go. So let's now create the button for the view and respond and for the delete button. So let's go back in here and under the card content, I'm going to create a card footer like this. And inside it, I have a button. And inside that button, basically we have a link come from the next link. And then I'm going to call this view. So let's do href. This is going to be go to the dashboard from /id. For the button here, I'm going to make sure I'm going to use as child. And also the variant, I'm going to use, let's do variant, let's say outline in this case. And also for the last name, I'm going to use flex1. So anyway, in this card footer, I'm going to add class name called, let's do display flex and then justify between like this, and the gap I'm going to setting that to just 2 right there. So great. And now let's try to just copy and paste this button here. I'm going to copy, paste that like so. And then for these responses, so let's do responses. I'm not going to use a variant outline, just make it the default styling. And then I think for the href, I'm going to change that to form/id /response, just like that. And also we have the delete button down here. So let's do button and then we have the delete. So for the delete button, I think I'm going to change the let's do class name flex1. And also for the variant, I'm going to use destructive or destructive. Yep. This basically will change the color to red color. Let me go back, and as you can see, this is what we have. But as you can see on the top right here, there's no space between the input search and the card. Let's go back to the, I think, form list. And then here, I think I'm going to add, let's do class name. And then I'm going to put this space y to 6. So now we have this space right here. Okay, so now this is more better. But as you can see, the search functionality is not yet work. So let's make it work. So in here, basically, I'm going to create a variable called filtered forms. Let's do cons filtered forms set equals to, let's grab the forms, and then I'm going to filter that. Let's do filter, we grab the individual form. And then inside in here, what I'm going to do, let's try to do form dot title dot, I'm going to make sure I'm going to change that to lowercase every title on the form. So I'm going to use the lowercase function in here. And then I'm going to say dot include. So let's do include. Let's just put the search value dot to lowercase as well. All right, so that's for the filter form. So now I'm going to change the form right here. So now I'm going to use filtered forms and just map through that value. I just want to say 2, for example. And as you can see now, just do that render. And if I do example, now just example will render. So now let's try to click maybe view. I'm going to click that. And as you can see, we on the detail right here. And then I can go back and I can click the another one. As you can see, we have the question. In this case, I can go back And let's try to click the responses. And as you can see, now there's an empty right here. So we need to create a response. So now let's go back to the dashboard. It's basically the dashboard, and inside the dashboard we have forms, and inside that we have the form ID, and then we need to basically create response inside the form ID. So let's do response, right? And inside that I'm gonna create page.tsx. Just like that, and let's do RFC, change the component name to form response page. Like that, let's try to save, and hopefully now we get that right here. So let's create the UI. So first on this div, I'm going to add class name. I'm going to do maximal width to 3XL, MX auto, and space Y to 6. And also inside in here, we have another div. So this basically have class name display flags, item center, and also justify between, like that. And inside that we have basically two components. This div is for a title, and we have another div for button, just like we're doing on the previous example. So as you can see here, we have the title and also the button. Great. So for the title here, I'm going to render heading 1. Let's say form response. Let's style it this heading 1. I'm going to say text 3XL. And also for the font, I'm going to say font bold. And also I'm going to render a p tag. So the form is to become from the data, basically from the database. So first, I think we are going to get that from the database using Prisma. So what I'm going to do, let's try to see in here. So the first thing is we need to check if the user login or not. So I think we can just copy and paste come from this right here, I believe. Yep. We can just copy and paste this one and just do that right here. So I just want to also copy the way we basically get the param. So I just want to copy these props and then just paste that like so. Of course, we need to import out and also change the component into async component. Just like that, and everything should be fine. So as you can see, this is the result. We have the title and also the button right here. Let's go back, and first I'm going to get the specific form for specific ID right here and for specific user that login. So let's try to do that right here. I'm going to do cons and then form set equals to await for the prisma dot form. This is for the form table, and then I'm going to use find unique like so, and then inside that I'm going to specify this is should be where the ID it should be equals to form ID. It's basically the ID right here on the URL. And also I also want to make sure the form it should be have user ID equals to user ID that login. And then I like to the return of the form it's include. Let me add include responses. And also I also want to include the answer. Also I like to include the question. So let's do include and then question, setting that to true. So let's try to order the response here. I'm going to order that by created add. So I'm going to say order by created add into descending. So the order by it will affect on this response basically because this is inside this response. And that's it. So let's try to check if there is no form here. Let's do if there's no form available. I just want to redirect user into the back to /dashboard/forms. So let's try to render the title here. So I'm gonna say form dot title, and yeah, I'm just doing typo here. It should be form dot title. Here we go. We get that value, and then here I'm gonna say dash form dot. Let's grab the responses dot length. Here we go. So let's typing responses. Let's save and let's take a look. As you can see, we have this title. This is the title too. We have 0 responses. Let's adding some class name in this p tag. I'm gonna do the text gray 500 and also the margin top. Let's do 1. Great. So for the button here, let's remove it, this div. I want to render a button tag from the UI slash component, and I want to make sure this should be as child. And I have variant to outline. So inside that, of course, I'm going to put link, come from the next link, and then let's do back to form. And then the link, it should be go to href set equals to, I'm going to go to slash dashboard slash forms slash whatever the form ID. So here I'm going to put variable form ID. Let's take a look. We have this back to form, and then also we have the title and also the paragraph. Let's go back here, and after this div, I'm going to create another div down here. But first I'm going to check if the form dot responses dot length is basically 0. That means there is no response in here. What I'm going to do, let's try to return this thing here, and else let's try to return this one. Let's go with the condition 0 first, which is this one. I'm going to render div right here, and then let's try to make sure all the text will be on the center. So I can do text center, and also the padding Y, I'm going to setting that to 10. Let's go with the border. And then the rounded, I'm going to make sure I'm going to use large. So inside the div, I have a p tag that say no responses. And also we have another p tag down here. Just say share your form to collect response. So under in here, if the condition is false, I want to render another div. And then for this div, let's add class name space y into, I'm going to setting that to 6, because in here we have some response basically. So I think first let's just try to map through that response. So we can say form dot responses, because this is array, we can do like dot map, so we can get the individual response like this, and then just return whatever you want. So in this time I'm just want to do heading 1. But next, I'm going to create another component basically. So let's try to render the response dot. We can get the maybe answer right here. Of course, we get an error because we don't send the key. Key should become from the response dot. Let's do response dot ID. All right, if I hover this one, as you can see, we have an error. It say the answer is basically half. Oh yeah. I think let's just render another thing. I think I'm going to do, I don't know, let's do just ID for now. It's fine. Okay, let's take a look what happened. So as you can see, we have this kind of like card right here. No response yet. Share your form to collect responses. So let's try to make it a little bit better. So for the paragraph, I'm going to do text. I'm going to setting that to gray 500. And also down here for the share right here, I also want to do the text gray 500 as well, and also margin top to 1. Save that, and here we go. So the question now is how we can get the response, right? So let's go back to my forms in here, and if you click, for example, view, as you can see, this is the link that we can share, right? So in here, that basically we can get the response back. So let's copy that and just paste that on the URL here and hit enter. As you can see now, there is no page right here. So let's try to create that. This is going to be inside of form slash form ID. So let's do that inside the app folders. I think I'm going to close everything first. So inside the app folders, we need to create folder called forms like this, because as you can see, we get the ID here. Of course, we also need to create another folder called, this is basically up to you, but I prefer to say form ID. Great. So inside in the form ID, we need to create the page.tsx. So we can do page.tsx just like this. So now we can do RFC like this and change the component name to just whatever you want. In this case, I'm going to say public form page. So now let's try to save, and hopefully we see this public form page. So let's try to just styling this a little bit. For this div, I'm going to do, let's try to say class name. I'm going to say minimal height to screen. And also minimal height screen. Also, I'm going to put the background gray 50. Also the padding Y, setting that to 12. Great. So inside that, I have another div. So this basically have container class, also the maximal width. I'm gonna do, let's say 3XL, and I like to, the maximal width should be on center, so I can do MX auto in here. Let's do background white, and also the padding, let's do 6, and the rounded, I just want to say large. Let's do rounded. I'm gonna do large, and I just want to add shadow right here. Great. So let's take a look inside this div. Basically, I'm going to render another component, and the component name, I'm going to call that form preview, just like that. And then we don't have yet the component, so let's try to create the component inside a component folder and form folder. So let's create a file called form-preview.tsx. Let's do RFC, change that to form preview like this, and now we can just import it on this page, just like that. So because on the form preview component, we need to handle kind of like on-click event. So of course we need to change the component to the client component. So on the client, we cannot get data from the database using Prisma. So that's why I just want to get the data from here inside the page. This is basically a server component, and we need to send that data into the props right here. So let's try to do that on the top. So I'm gonna say cons form set equals to await. Let's do await for the prisma dot form dot find unique, because as you can see on the URL we get the ID, right? So we can get the specific form by this ID. So let's try to do that here. So I'm gonna make sure that we do where the ID is equal to. So here we need to get the form ID. How we get the form ID? So let's try to go back to dashboard, and then I believe it should be inside the form ID right here. And then I just want to copy and paste these properties, these props, and then paste that to the public form page. And then now we can just get that form ID, right? Just copy that and back that right here. And here we go. Now we get the form ID. Just paste that to this ID here. And of course, the component should be async component. Just do that like this. Great. So after we get the form, I want to, the response is include. Let's do include the questions. So also I like to just order by, let's say order ascending. Great. So now we have that form. And then first, I think I'm going to check that. So if the form doesn't exist, for example, user just typing random ID in here, of course, there's no form that corresponding with that ID. So here, just return a not found. So let's do return a not found component from the next navigation, I believe. So now we can send the form into the form preview component like this. Set equals to form like that. So let's go to the form preview, and we can grab that right here, basically, just like this. So let's first create the type of the form. So I'm going to say form preview props type, and then let's create the type on the top right here. So we can say type set equals to form preview props, set equals to an object. And in here we have form. So the form should have an ID, the ID string. We have also title. Title is string. We have a description. The description is basically string. Also, we have the question, right? The question here, it should come from the, I'm going to create another type of question, basically. So I think, or I think we can generate from the Prisma. I think it's fine. So let's try to create the UI. Oh yeah, we need to just make sure this should be inside an array like this. So I think first I'm going to render a heading one and paragraph in here. So let's just try to, I think I just want to copy and paste that like this. So as you can see, we have this title and also we have this description. Let's try to see. As you can see, this is the title, and description for this form ID is basically empty. So that's why we still get the ID, not the description. And on the div right here, I'm going to do maximal width. I'm going to make sure this should be XL and also the MX auto. And then let's try to do another thing in down here. So I'm going to create form basically, so user can submit the question that user have already filled. So here I'm gonna say form, and the action I just want to remove for now. So inside the form we have a div. This div is basically have class name space y24, and inside that we have basically label and also the input. So let's try to do label. Label come from the UI, and then in this label I'm gonna say your name. So this is basically an optional, so I'm gonna say optional, just like that. Let's add also the input field. So let's do input, come from the UI, and also here I'm going to make sure I'm going to do placeholder. Let's say enter your name. Let's try to save and just take a look what we have. As you can see, this is the name, and this is basically an optional. When user typing value inside this input, I like to store that value on the state. So let's create a state here called name and also email. Let's import the useState on the top. Because we're using useState, of course, this component, it should be a client component. So we can do use client just like this. Save that, and then inside this input, let's do value. Value, it should be come from the name state. And then we have on change event. So let's do on change, and then I'm gonna grab the event. So here I'm gonna say set name into e.target.value. Also, let's add this margin top 1. And then after we have this name field, we need to create another input for email basically. So let's just copy and paste this one like that. And then this is basically your email. And again, this is basically just optional. User can send email or not, it's just whatever. And then here for the placeholder, let's do enter your email, and the type, I just want to make sure this is basically input field with type email, and the value should be email, and then the on change event should be set email. So let's take a look. We have this your name and also your email, but I like to have some space between this div basically. So we need to add because we wrapping this div here inside of form. Basically we can add class name here to say space y2. I'm gonna setting that to 6 maybe. Save that, and here we go, we have that space. So let's now render the question. Let's go back, and then after we render this name and email, I think down here we also need to render the question. So let's do div. This div is basically have class name called space y. I'm gonna setting that to 6. So inside this div, basically I'm going to mapping the question. So I can say like form dot questions dot map, but before I'm mapping that question, I like to just make sure the order is correct. So I'm going to use dot sort in here, and then let's try to do A and B. Also we can say like A dot order minus B dot order, like that. And then after that we can do like dot map like this, and then we can get the question and the index. So we can say questions, and also we can get the index right here. And then finally we can just return the JSX inside in here. So just make sure we send the key. Key should become from the question dot ID. I think I'm doing something wrong in here. As you can see, we have question. I think this should be form dot questions, not question. Let me go back to that form first. As you can see, we have questions right here. And then I think the problem is on the type. As you can see here, it should be questions. So now we need to change this one to questions like this. And we get the individual question and just get the questions.id. And also I'm going to add class name space y22. And also inside that div, I'm going to render the label and basically and text area. So let's do first the label. Label, it should be half text. I think the index, let's do index plus 1, because index start from 0. That's why I'm going to adding 1 in here. And also I'm going to say dot, and then the question text. Let's do question dot text. Let's try to see the label first, and as you can see here, we get the label. What is this? That's basically the label. Still inside this div, I'm going to render text area. So let's do text area components, come from the UI, just like this. And then I'm going to put the placeholder. Let's put your answer in here so user can typing the answer. So let's try to see the UI. As you can see, it's look pretty nice. So anyway, how about the value from the answer? So we are going to store that value into the state. So let's do value set equals to empty object for now. So let's scroll up and we are going to create the state. So for the state, I'm going to give a name answers just like this. And by default, let's put array, and then inside that, I'm going to put object. This is basically the format of the answer, and the format is basically array, and inside that we have an object, and then we have, for example, question ID, and then let's just put empty string, and also we have the text. This is basically what user typing on the input field. So the way we get the value is basically in here. What I'm going to do, let's say answer, this is basically array, and then I'm going to do dot find, right? So let's find the, I'm going to do a for answer, for individual answer on the state, and then I'm going to do a dot question ID equal to basically question. This should become from this questions object, and then I'm going to do dot ID, right? If the question ID from the answer is equal to question ID from the questions form, what I'm going to do is let's try to render the text. Let's do dot text just like this, or I'm going to say or just render empty string. So now let's take a look what we have. As you can see, we get an error here. Let's see, it's basically your provide value props to a form field without onChange handler. Yep, it's just because we don't create the onChange handler on the text area. So let's do onChange. So this onChange is basically take an event, and then here I'm going to run another function. So the function is, I'm going to call this handle answer change, just like this. And then I'm going to send parameter on that function, which is question ID. And also I'm going to send the value of the onChange. So I'm going to get that from the e.target.value. So now let's create that function handle answer change. Let's do on the top right here. So let's say cons handle answer change set equals to arrow function. So now let's try to create another form so you will get understand better when follow this tutorial, because in here we just have one question, right? So let's create another form to basically create like a 3 or 4 questions so it will more understandable. So let's try to create form in here, and let's try to fill this title. I'm going to just paste that like so. The title is customer satisfaction survey, and then I just want to put this description text right here. And also for the question one, I'm going to say, how satisfied are you with our services, right? Just random things in here. And also I'm going to put the other things like this. What can we improve? Add another question like, would you recommend us to the others? Let's paste that like so. So I think I'm gonna create that again. So we have a lot of question, and let's paste that here. So we have, how did you hear about us? Great. So we have 4 question, and then I'm gonna create form, and here we go. It's successfully great. We have 4 questions. So let's try to see the response in here. As you can see, we don't have a response because we don't send these to others. So let's just copy and paste that on the browser. And as you can see here, we have basically 4 question, right? That render, pretty cool. So let's take a look in our code right here on text area. We have value, right? So in here, basically the value is based on the answer state, and we're checking if the question ID come from the answer state is equal to question ID from the questions form. But as you can see, the question ID from the answer is basically empty string. So I need to, this is basically come from the question. So we get also the question ID from the question form. So let's try to, I think we need to map through the question in here. So we get the question ID. So the way we do that is I'm going to remove this array. And then the way we do that is let's try to say form right? Form dot questions, we get the questions array, and I'm going to say dot map. And in here, I have the individual question like that. And then what I'm going to do is let's return object. So here we can have question ID, right? And the question ID should become from the key.id. All right, key.id. And for the text, I'm going to put that empty string. So now if you just console log the answer, the format is same, but now we have the question ID value. If you take a look on the console here, as you can see, we have 4 array, right? If I'm not using this one, we just have one object inside an array. But if I map through the value from the questions form, we get 4 answer. This is basically matched with the question that render on the browser. Let's first get the parameter, which is question ID and text. This is basically a string. And down here, what we are going to do is let's set the answer into, basically we are going to get the previous value, which is the answer itself. And then here, what I'm going to do, let's try to do mapping. So I'm going to say previous, right? Or we can just say return previews.map. Here I can grab the individual answer, right? I'm going to say A in this case. And then I'm going to say a.questionID is equal to the question ID from the params, right? If the a.questionID from the answer is equal to question ID from the params, what I'm going to do, let's render all the A, which is all the answer, and then I'm going to put the text. The text, it should be equal to text, come from the params. But if we have same value here, we don't need to send text basically, just put text itself like this. And then or, let's put or in here. We need to just put E, just like this. So I hope this understandable. Let's answer the first question to very satisfied. As you can see here on the console, we have that result. On the text, we have the very satisfied right here. So for example, on the question 3, will you recommend us to others? I'm going to say yes, maybe. And as you can see here on the console, we have the yes. This is basically for the specific question 3, right? And yep, we can do like anything in here. How did you hear about us? I'm going to say maybe Instagram ads, right? If I go back here, as you can see, we get the result. So anyway, we get the text based on the ID. That's pretty nice. So let's try to go back in here. And what we need to do next is let's create the button for submit the answer right down here. Let's go back in here and let's create a div. And then I'm going to add class name into display flags and justify n to basically put this button on the right side right here. So now let's try to do a button. This button should become from the UI, and then I'm going to change the text into submit response. And as you can see, that's the button. Pretty nice. And also we need to specify this button. It should be have type submit, just like this. So what happens if I run the submit response button is basically this form will run. So in this form, I'm going to add on submit event. So let's do on submit, and then we need to run the handle submit function. So let's do that in here. Let's say cons handle submit set equals to arrow function. And then for now, just console log the answer, for example. Here we go. Let's try. I just want to clean everything in here and just do random things. So now let's try to click submit response. As you can see, we have this response right here. I cannot see that. The browser is reload, right? So we need to handle that reload. I don't want that happen. So here I'm gonna grab the event. So this event, it should be have type form event like this. And then I just want to prevent that event. So let's do e.prevent default like this. Let's try again. I just want to do random value here. Let's hit submit response. As you can see, we get that value on the console. So let's here validate the required fields. I'm going to say cons empty answers set equals to, I want to get all the answer from the state. And then I'm going to say sum, right? Grab the individual answer here. And I'm going to say if the answer dot text is empty. And I'm going to use trim in here because will remove all the space. So down here, we need to just check if the empty answer is have a value. What I'm going to do is just run the toast notification in here. So I'm going to say toast.error like that, and just put, let's say, all questions are required. And also I just want to return nothing in here. So let's try. I just want to do maybe just remove this answer on the question 2. Let's try to hit submit response. As you can see, we have this error that say all questions are required. So down here, what you're gonna do, let's try to use try and catch to basically make a post request on the API. So let's do try. And then down here, we catch that. So let's try to make a post request in here. So I'm going to create a variable called response, set equals to await for the fetch, right? So I'm going to make a fetch on the /API/responses like this. And of course, we need to send the method, the body, and etc. So the method, it should be a post request. And also we're going to send the headers. The header should be content type application JSON. And finally down here, we need to send the content or the body. So the body, it should be, I'm going to say JSON.stringify. And then let's put the form ID in here. The form ID, it should be come from the form.id, right? It's basically come from the props right here. And then the next thing is we need to send the answer. Answer is basically come from the state. And also we need to send the respondent name. Respondent name. This basically come from the name state. And also we have respondent email. This is basically also come from the email state. Change that into email, just like that. And as you can see, we got this error here that say this function, it should be async function. So let's do async like this. So let's try to see on the API. I think we don't yet create that API. So as you can see, API, we just have forms right here. So we need to create responses. So let's go to API and then create folder called responses. And then inside that, we need to create road.ts file. So let's try to export the async function. I'm gonna call this post because we are going to make it post request in here. For the parameter, I'm gonna say request, and the request here should be have type request like that. And inside it here, basically first we need to get the data from the request JSON. So I'm gonna say cons. Let's do object in here, just destructuring the value from the request.json. And what we need to get in here is just basically form ID. We also have, it should be inside an object right here, basically form ID. We also have the answers. Also, we have the respondent name and also respondent email. And also after that, we need to check if the form is exists or not. So we can say like check if the form exists, right? So here we can say cons and then form set equals to await for the Prisma dot form. And then I'm going to find that using find unique, right? So here I can say where the ID of the form is equal to the form ID come from the request JSON right here. And after we get that, I also want to include the response, basically should be include the questions. Let's setting that to true, just like that. So now let's try to, here I'm gonna say, if the form is doesn't access, right? If the form is empty or doesn't access, here I'm gonna say just return new response or next response, I believe. Next response. And then here I'm gonna do form not found, just like that. And then send the status into 404 for error not found. And also down here, let's validate the answer. So I'm gonna say validate answers. Great. So here I'm gonna say if the answer is empty, right? The answer is not array, I'm going to just return the error as well. So I'm going to say return new response answer are required and status 400. So after we validate the form and the answer, and finally we are going to create the form response. So here I'm going to create variable called form response set equals to await for the Prisma dot. I'm gonna get the form response table, and then I'm gonna create. So let's try to put a data inside the form response. So the first thing is I'm gonna send the form ID. So let's do form ID should be equals to form ID from this request.json right here. And also we need to send the respondent name and also the respondent email. Also we need to send the answer. The answer, it should be, let's send a create in here, and let's do answer just like this. But as you can see, we get this error here. I'm not sure what happened, so let's take a look. Let me see. So I think we let me go back to schema.prisma. So as you can see on the form response model, basically we send the user ID and also user. And this is basically required. That's why on the road here we get an error because we not send the user ID. So anyway, this form response, it should be public, so user not login can still send a response. So that's why this user ID, I just want to remove that from the form response model, just like that. And make sure we also remove the form response inside the user model, just like this. Great. So now let's try to update that database. So we can say like npx prisma db push and hit enter. So now let's run npx prisma studio to see the database. Let's open the form response right here, and as you can see, now we don't have the user ID anymore. That's pretty nice. Let's take a look on the form. I think on the, let's go back to the road. As you can see now, the data here is not error again. Great. So we can do npm run dev and then just close the terminal. So after we add new data on the form response table, next thing is we are going to send the return next response.json and then just send the form response. Great. So I think everything should be fine. Let's try to see what happened here if we make a post request. But I think I'm going to make sure that if the response is not okay, if something wrong happened, I want to throw this error. And also if the response is success, I want to say those notification in here that say success. And then I'm going to send basically the title and also the description. So let's just paste that right here. As you can see, the title is response submitted and also this description right here. And also if something wrong happened, I just want to console error and also show that those notification as well. So as you can see in here, this is just console error, the error submitting form, and then this error variable should become from the catch. So let's grab it like this. So I think it's fine right now. So let's try it. So basically, I'm going to put the name here to maybe John, and then the email, let's say john@mail.com, just like that. And also for the answer, for the first question is how satisfied are you with our service? So I'm gonna say this first question, I'm gonna answer very satisfied. For the second one, I'm gonna say faster response time. And then would you recommend us to others? I'm gonna say yes. And then the last is gonna be how did you hear about us? I'm gonna put Instagram, just like that. So now let's try to click submit response. Let's open network so you can see the response. Let's click submit. And then as you can see, we get an error. As you can see, error, something went wrong while submitting your response. So as you can see, the response is just empty, but the payload is, I think, is fine. So I think the problem is because as you can see on the form preview here, we send form ID with capital I and D. So we get the on the road is just form ID with lowercase d. So that's why we get an error. So basically this form ID is not accessed. So let's try to change this one to just lowercase d, and hopefully now it just works. So let's try to submit that again. I'm gonna click submit response. And as you can see, response submitted. Thank you for completing this form. So let's go to network, and as you can see, this is basically the response. Pretty nice. Let's see on the database. As you can see on the form response, basically we have this ID, form ID, and then answer. We have 4 answer right here. Pretty nice. So let's go back to the right here. So anyway, after user send the response, I need to user redirect to the, maybe you can redirect user to thank you page, something like that. But I like to just redirect user to the root of the application. So let's go back in here, and after we show the success, so basically first I'm going to reset the answer field right here. So let's do that. And as you can see, this basically will reset the question text. So now all the question here will becoming empty string. And also this is basically will reset the name field and also the email field. And also down here, we need to redirect user to the home page. So I'm going to use a router to do that. So we need to, of course, create the router variable on the top right here. So we can say const and then router set equals to, we can use router from the next/navigation, and here we go. So now let's try to just close the terminal, and then let's try to see again. We need to send couple of answer, Mike or something like that. Let's do Mike at gmail.com. And for the answer of the first question, I'm going to say not satisfied. For the what can we improve, I'm going to say better customer support like this. And would you recommend us to others? I'm going to say no. And for the how did you hear about us, let's just put Google search, just like that. So now let's try to submit that. And then as you can see, we got the toast notification, and after that, it will redirect user to the root of the application, which is pretty cool. As you can see here, we have the response as well. And now let's try to see our all forms. Now we see, as you can see, there's a lot of form right here. Let's try to click this view. And as you can see this question, which is 4 question, and then few responses. As you can see, we should see just the ID for now. So let's try to make it better. The UI for the form responses. It should be inside the dashboard /form/form ID. So let's close everything here. Let's go to app and then dashboard, form, and then form ID, which is this one right here. And /responses. So basically this one right here. Great. So let's try to make this better. So we need to basically render component in this h1. So I'm going to remove that and change that to form response. And then we need to also send the key. The key should be set equals to response.key. Just like that. And now as you can see, we don't have the form response component. Let's go to component folders, forms, and then we need to create that in here. Let's create a file called form-response.tsx. Let's do rfc and then text the component name. And after that, we need to import right here. Just import it. Here we go. This should be ID, I believe. Yep. Great. So now as you can see, we have form response. Nice. Let's try to just styling this form response. So first we need to create the type of the props. So here, let's do type, and I'm going to call this response props. Set equals to an object, and then I'm going to put this response just like this. This response here is basically have an ID. The ID is string, have created at, respondent name, respondent email, and also the answer. The answer should be have an ID text and also the question ID text and order. This should be inside the array. And now we can get the props. So I'm going to put that in here. The props name is going to be response and the type is response props. Just make sure on the page right here, we also send the response set equals to response. But as you can see, we get this error here. I believe the answer, question ID, and etc. So after I checking what the problem I get in here is just because, as you can see on the form response, I set the answer to just question with lowercase key, right? But on the page right here, basically what happened is I get a question with capital key. And then it's not show the error because the error should be come from the schema anyway. As you can see guys, on the model answer here, we have the question with capital key right here. So I'm sorry about that, and I'm going to remove it, change that to lowercase. And now, of course, we still get an not error in here, right? Because we need to basically run the npx prisma db push. Let's try to push that new data. And now, as you can see, hopefully, as you can see, we got the error. Nice. We need to change that using lowercase right now. So let's change that using lowercase like this. And then let's scroll it down. Hopefully we still get an error here, bro. What happened now? Let's see. I'm not sure what happened right now. So anyway, the error is a types of property question are incompatible. So anyway, what happened is because on the schema Prisma, we set the question into the optional, but on the form response, we set the question to have this value, right? We can fix that by say or null right here. Will fix the error. As you can see, the error is gone. Or we can change the schema Prisma. But because answer is always have question, I just want to remove the optional value in here, and let's try to do npx prisma db push again. Here we go. Let's run it. And now hopefully we can go back right here and just remove this null. And now the error should be gone, right? We not see any error again. Pretty nice. Let's still go back in the form response, and then we're going to change this div here into the card. So I'm going to remove this div, and then now let's return card component from the UI. And then inside that we have the card header. Also after that, we have also the card content. On the card header, I'm going to put the card title. So let's do card title. And this card title is basically, I'm going to put a div. So first, I'm going to check if the response name have a value or not, because response name is basically optional. So I'm going to put that in here. As you can see, if the respondent name have a value, just put like this. If not, just put anonymous response. So as you can see now, if I refresh it, hopefully we get the card that say from the respondent name. Here we go. As you can see, this is from the Mike. This is from the John. Pretty nice. And also under in here, I also want to check if the respondent email have a value or not. So as you can see, I just render the respondent email. If there's a have value, I'm going to return this span that have TypeScript 500 and text small margin left 2. And then just render the respondent email right here. So now let's see, we get the email. So the next thing is we need to format the date and also the time. So let's use this variable right here. I call this formatted date and then formatted time. Formatted date, it should be get the response created at and then run the local date string. For the time, I'm using to local time string. And then now let's try to render that just still inside the title. Right here, still inside the title, but outside this div. Here we go. Let's save that. Let's take a look. As you can see, we have the time right here. So now let's try to render the question and also the answer. Let's go back and I just want to console log the response. So I'm just wondering what we have on the response. As you can see, this basically comes from the server, and inside that, basically we have this answer array. And as you can see, inside that we have the question as well. So let's try to render that. Inside the card content, what I'm going to do is let's try to do div, and then I'm going to add class name to space y4 like that. And in here, I just want to mapping the response answer. So we can say response.answer.map, and then we grab the individual answer. And then here, what I'm going to do, let's try to return a div. So this div, it should be have key. The key should become from the answer.id. And then inside that, I'm going to put heading 3. This is basically for the question. So we can say answer.question.text. Okay. And also down here, we need to render the answer based on that question. So here we can say question or answer.text. Let's try to see what we have. As you can see, this is basically the question and this is basically the answer. And now I just want to change the styling for the answer here. Let's do class name font to medium. And for the answer, basically, I'm going to change that into, let's say, class name that have margin top to 1 and white space into pre-wrap. Just use that, and this is what we have. So let's try to go back to the form, and now we should see this form right here. And then as you can see, the response is 2. If I click, we just have to respond. Pretty nice. Let's go back to the dashboard. And then now basically we are going to just integrate this count right here, because now this is not from the database, right? So let's go back to the dashboard. Let me go back to the dashboard, and then page.tsx right here. Basically we need to see how we get this form right here. So I'm going to copy that text and then just run this Control F. As you can see, this is we render. This is just hard-coded value, so we need to get that value from the database basically. So here let's try to get the users forms and response count. So here I'm going to say counts forms count set equals to await for the Prisma dot form, and I'm going to use count in here, count, and then let's count the where the user ID is equal to user ID. So how we get the user ID? Let's go to layout of the dashboard in here. So this is basically how we can get the user ID. So let's try to just copy this and paste that to the page right here on the top, just like that, and import the out into the next server right here. And as you can see, we're good to go. Great. So let's try to just console log the form, or I think just put that value on the forms down here. So let's just putting like so. So let's take a look what we have. So as you can see, we have just 4 form right now. If I click, as you can see, now we have 4, right? That's pretty nice. And also for the response, let's try to get the response. The way we get the response count is really similar. So we can say counts, and I'm going to call this response count, just like that, set equals to await Prisma dot. In this case, we need to get the table form response, right? Form response dot count. And then here I'm going to set the where the form user ID is equal to user ID. And then after we get the response count, let's just render that, I believe right here on the total response. Let's just putting that like so. So now as you can see, we have 2 responses. And also I believe this recent form is basically hard-coded value. So let's go back here, and as you can see, this is just hard-coded. It's not from the database. So let's try to get the real data from the database. Here I'm going to make a comment first. Let's do get recent forms, just like this. So now let's try to create a variable called recent forms and set equals to await for the Prisma dot form dot find many in this case, because we need to get all of that, but we need to take just 5 first data. So here I'm going to say where the user ID is equal to user ID, and also I'm going to order by created at, and I'm going to use the scanning. And then down here I also just take the first 5 form, and then down here I want to include, let's do include, and then let's select the count. So I'm going to use count in here, and then what I'm going to select is basically the response. So let's select the response, set that to true, just like that. And as you can see, we get this error here. I'm not sure what happened. Let's see, type created at the scanning is not assignable to type form. What is this? Did you mean dash scanning? Oh yeah, we need to just remove this space. Here we go. So now let's try to render the recent form down here. I'm going to go to the recent form, which is right here. Let's try to add the recent form. I'm going to check first the recent form dot length. If that is equals to 0, I'm going to render just a p tag in here, right? Just p tag like this. And else I'm going to render basically div, just like that. For now it's fine. So anyway, first on this p tag, what I'm going to do, let's try to put a text. So the text, it should be you haven't created any form yet. That's for the p tag. And for the div right here, basically I'm going to make sure we have this class name space y to 4. And then I'm going to map through that resend form inside this div. So I can do resend form and then dot map. And then here I get the individual form like that and just return a div like this. So anyway, what this div is basically what you see right here. I just want to cut this one, cut everything, and just paste that like so. Right, we get this error because we not send key basically. So let's send key, set equals to form.id. Let's just do that. And now as you can see, we can go back and we have these 3 forms, but the value is still come from the value here. Of course, we need to make sure this should become from the database form.title like this. Let's close that. As you can see, now the title it should be different, right? And I'm going to remove this p tag right here and replace that with this p tag. As you can see, I just show the count of the responses and the responses text and then dot and then created on and then this date right here created at and then to local date string. Let's try to see the result. This is basically the result. Also down here, I think the view and the response is fine, but the ID here, we need to change that. So the ID should become from the form.id and this ID as well. Great, so I think it's fine. Let's try to click that view and we're on the view right now. Let's go back. If I click respond, as you can see, we're on the response. So let's try to see what we don't yet handle. Let's click the view all form, and as you can see, basically this delete button is not working, right? So let's make it work. And also the view, basically this edit, we don't handle that yet. So let's first working with the delete, right? I just want to make this delete works first. So let's try to create the route, I think. So let's go to the app right here. API and then forums, and then here basically we need to create form ID. So let's create folder called form ID, and then inside that we need to create the route. So let's do route.ts. Here we go. So here I'm going to export async function. I'm going to call this delete because this is for delete requests. And then I just want to get the request in here. The request it should be have type request like that. And also we can get the params basically. So as you can see, this is the way we get the form ID from the params because we set this route inside the form ID. That's why we can get the form ID. Great. So here, the first thing is I'm going to get the user ID. So we can say cons and then user ID set equals to await for the out, right? That's how we get the user ID. And then we need to get the form ID. So we can say cons, and then we can grab form ID from the await params, just like that. And then here we need to check if the user ID doesn't exist, just return error. So I'm going to say return a new response or next response, I believe. Next response like that, and I'm gonna say unauthorized. Also the status I'm gonna say 401. So down here finally we need to find that form, so we can say cons form set equals to await for the Prisma. Let's say prisma.form.find unique. We're going to find the form based on the form ID. So here I'm going to specify the where the ID, it should be equals to the params ID, which is form ID right here, right? Just paste that like so. Now we can check if there's no form in this specific ID, just return form not found, which is like so. And also we need to check if the form.userid, which is the specific form right here that we get, right, is not equal to user ID. That means if user login with another account, for example, and of course user cannot delete the user that have different user ID like that. And also down here, finally, we need to delete the form. So we can say await for the prisma.form.delete the way we delete that is pretty simple. We can say where the ID is equal to form ID, like that. And finally, we need to just send the next response success to true, just like this. Great. So I think the delete route is done. So now let's try to call this delete route. So anyway, we can call that on the dashboard/form. So let's go to dashboard/form, which is this page right here. As you can see, this will render the form list. Let's open it. And form list is basically will render form card. Let's open it. And this is basically the delete button. Great. So anyway, I'm going to create the delete button on another component because this is going to still be the server component. I like to the delete button will becoming the client component. So that's why I'm going to put that on another component. So let's create the component in here. I'm going to create a file called delete-form-button.tsx, and let's do rfc. Just change the component name into delete form button, and we are going to just copy and paste this button right here and just render that like this, right? Just make sure we import the button, and also we are going to render that on here. So we can say delete form button just like this. And anyway, we need to send basically the form ID. Form ID, it should be equals to form .id, or I think we can get the ID here directly. So let's put ID like this, it's fine. Let's go to delete form button. So let's create the type on the top right here, delete from button props that have form ID, it's string. So now let's grab that form ID. So we can do form ID, and then the type is going to be this delete from button props. So let's add onClick event on this button. OnClick set equals to handle delete. So let's create the handle delete function. I'm gonna do const handle delete set equals to arrow function. And of course, this arrow function, it should be async function. So let's change that to async like this. And inside that, basically, we are going to use try and catch. So let's do try and catch. So what we're going to do in here is pretty simple. First, I'm going to create response variable set equals to await into the fetch. And then here, I'm going to run /API/form/ the form ID. So we can get that from the form ID. So let's put that in here, form ID, right? Come from these props. And then we need to send the method. So let's do method is going to be delete. Just like that, and we done basically. So down here, we need to check if the response is not okay, we need to return this true new error. Just like that. And down here, we also need to show the toast notification when the delete is successfully. So let's just paste this toast notification, pretty simple. As you can see, we need to, of course, import the toast notification, and we're running toast.success, and the title is form deleted successfully. And also we need to just refresh the browser. So let's create the router. So here I'm going to say const router set equals to use router. It should become from the next navigation, just like this. And if something wrong happened, let's handle the catch right here. I just want to console error and also add the toast notification error like this. The error should become from the catch. Let's grab it like this. And then finally, basically, I'm going to create a state called is deleting. I just want to paste that right here on the top, is deleting like this. And then, of course, we need to import the use state like this because we're using use state. Of course, this component, it should be client component. So we can do like use client on the top. When we need to set the is deleting to true, it's basically before we make a try and catch. So basically, I'm going to do that on the top right here. And after everything done, on the finally, I'm going to set the is deleting back to false. Just like that. And then I'm going to add the disable button here if the is deleting is true. Let's do is deleting like that. And also I'm going to change the text based on the is deleting state. If the is deleting true, showing deleting 3 dot, and else just show delete. All right, I think it's fine. So let's try to see what happened. Let's go back here. I'm going to delete, for example, this one right here. Click delete, and as you can see, we got this error. Let's take a look what we have. I'm not sure what happened here. So I found the problem why we cannot delete the form. So basically the problem is still inside the schema. So anyway, because the form is the parent for the question and responses, as you can see here, of course, we are gonna add these. I'm going to get all the references, and then I'm gonna add these on delete basically. So what the on delete cascade mean? So it mean if I delete, for example, for the specific form, right? If I delete this one, we still have question and response, right? If I delete the specific form, all the question and form response that corresponding with that form will be automatically deleted. So that's why we need to put the on delete cascade right here, right? I hope that makes sense. And now let's try to run npx prisma db push, and after that let's try to do npm run dev again, and hopefully now we can delete that form. Let's go back in here and just refresh to make it everything clean. Let's try to, for example, delete the form. So I'm going to delete the form right here, delete that, and as you can see, it's gone. But I like to have the default confirmation from the browser. So let's go back to the delete form right here. Before we set the is deleting to true, I like to have this condition here. If the confirm is false, just return nothing. It means if I click delete, if I click cancel, nothing happened, right? If I do delete and then OK, it will delete that form basically. As you can see, it's gone. So let's click delete here, and then as you can see, we have the confirmation. Let's click OK, and it will gone. So the last thing that we need to handle is basically, I believe, the edit. As you can see, I can go back to form, and then let's click the views, and then here, if I click edit, nothing happened because we don't create the edit page. So let's try to create that a little bit. So let's try to create that a little quick. I'm gonna close the terminal here, and then we need to create the edit is basically inside the dashboard /form/id/edit. So let's go to app and dashboard /form/id/edit. So inside the form ID, we need to create also folder called edit like this. And inside that we have page.tsx. Just like that, RFC, just save that. And as you can see, now we have this page, really nice. So let's change the component name to the edit form page, and we are going to get the params basically. So the way we get the params is let's just copy and paste come from the, I believe right here. Yep, we can just copy these params here and then go back to the edit and just paste that like so. And also we can just copy everything here, just copy that and back that right here, paste that like so. Of course, we need to change the component into the async function component and just import the out like so. So in this div, I'm going to add class name called maximal width 3xl and mx auto. Also inside that we have another div right here. So this div is basically will render the title and also this paragraph right here. As you can see, we have edit form and also update your form detail and question. Let's try to see. This is the result. Just really clean. And down here, finally, we need to render the form builder. So let's do form builder. We already have that. So let's just render it. And this is what we have. So now what we need to do is let's get the form based on this ID. And then we need to put that data, form data into this field right here. All right, so I think first what we're gonna do, let's try to create variable called form, and then in here we need to basically wait for the prisma.form table, and then we need to use find unique, and then where the ID is equal to form ID right here. If we get that, I like to also include the question and order by order ascending. And I'm going to check in here if the form doesn't exist. I'm going to redirect user to the dashboard/form. And if the form.user ID is not equal to user.login, also redirect user to the dashboard/form. forms. So now we need to send the initial data set equals to form, and also the is editing, I'm gonna setting that to true. As you can see, we get this error because form builder is not handle that props basically. So in this form builder component, I can get the initial data props and also the is editing. And the is editing, I set the default value to false. And then now let's try to create the type of the props. So here I'm gonna say type. I'm gonna call this form builder props set equals to an object. And then here I'm gonna put the initial data like this. The initial data it should be have ID. The ID it should be an optional. The ID is string. Also we have the title. Title it should be string. Also we have description. This is also string. Also questions. Let's do questions. The questions it should be have another type. I'm gonna create type called questions in here inside an array. So let's create the question type on the top right here. I'm gonna do type questions that equals to an object, and here I'm gonna say ID to string, and also the text it should be string as well. Just like that. So now we can put the form builder props in this props type right here. So now we can just render the initial data into this state basically. So I'm gonna put that in here, initial data.title into the title form. And also I'm gonna send the initial data.description and also the initial data.question. Initial data.questions, just like that. And yep, let's try to see what we have. As you can see, basically the default value will store right here, and we can see the value right now. That's pretty nice. So if you take a look on the very bottom, as you can see, we have the create form. I'm going to change the text right here to update form basically. So let's go to very bottom here. I just want to remove the create form right here and just paste this condition. Basically, if the is editing true, show update form, and else show create form. So now as you can see, we have update form. So now let's see what happened when we click the handle submit. As you can see, this function will run. And then basically this URL, I'm going to change this URL based on the is editing. So let me show you right here. I'm going to create a variable called URL set equals to if the is editing true. I'm going to basically make a put request on this URL. I'm going to just paste that URL. We don't have yet the route, but we're going to create that later. So as you can see here, it will go to the API /forms and then /ID, right? And else we are going to use this /API /form for basically create new form like that. And also I'm going to create another variable called method. So method like this. And if the is editing true, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use put method, but else I'm going to use post request, just like that. So we can put the method on this value here, right? Because we have same name here, I just can remove it and it just do the same thing. So for the URL, I'm going to remove this string here and just put URL variable come from this variable here. And for the toast notification, as you can see in here, this is just form created. So I'm going to change that. As you can see, if the is editing true, I'm going to show form updated and I'll show forms created. So I think we're done with this form. Let's go back to the form builder, and as you can see, we get that error. Let's see what happened here. Properties editing does not exist. So basically we need to add the type right here is editing, just putting that as an optional, and the value is going to be Boolean. Great. So now let's try to create the road. Let's just close this one, go to app and then API and then forms and then form ID. So inside of form ID, as you can see what happened here, let me scroll down. It should be go to the API /form ID. So that's why we need to create that in here. Basically, we need to do that in here. So we can say export async function. I'm going to call this put for updated, like that. So the first thing is we need to get basically the request and also the params. So I'm going to do like this so you can see clearly. As you can see, we got the request and also the params form ID basically. So down here we need to just check like this. I'm going to paste that like so. And I think for the validation, I just want to do the same thing right here. Just copy all of this, right? Just do that validation and then just paste that right here inside the function put. Just paste it. As you can see, this is just doing simple validation. If the user ID is not login, just return this one. So this basically just get the form for specific form ID. If the form doesn't exist, just show this response form not found. If the form from the if the form user ID is not equal to user ID.login, just show this response. So now we can get the title, the description, and the question from the request. So we can do like set equals to await for request.json, just like that. And then now what we need to do in here is first I just wanted to just simple validation for the title and also for the questions. So let's do in here, if the title is empty, I just want to return really simple text right here. Just call title is require like this, and the status is 400. Also, if the question is empty, down here I'm going to return also this response, at least one question is required. And then after that validation, finally down here we can do update form detail. So let's take a look. First, we are going to update this title and description. And the title and description is basically inside the, let me go to Prisma and schema. It's basically inside the form table. So right here, right? So the way we update that, it's pretty simple. Let's go back in here and we're going to do, let's say const update set equals to await for the Prisma dot, this is for specific form table, and I'm going to say update. Just like that, and just make sure the ID should be same with the form ID. ID set equals to form ID, right? The ID should be same. And then we need to send this new data basically. The title, it should become from the title right here, right? And also the description, it should become from that description request JSON right here. And then after we update the form, the next thing is basically we need to remove the question, right? Because user can basically change this question right here. User can remove it. And we are assuming that we are going to delete all the question basically. And if user update, just create new question with this data right here. So first what I'm going to do is delete all the existing question. So here I'm going to make a comment. Let's do delete all existing question like this. So as you can see, question is basically inside the question table right here. So we can basically delete all of that. So in here, I can just directly await the Prisma dot questions and then dot delete many. This is basically will delete all the question specific for that form ID. So here I'm going to say where the form ID is equal to form ID like that. This is will delete all the question based on the form ID. And after we delete that, we need to create new question. So let's do that down here. So this basically will create new questions like that. And I'm going to wait for the Prisma dot question dot create many like that. And let's now send the data. So the first thing is we need to send the basically the questions. So I'm going to map through the question in here, questions dot map, and I get the key for the individual question, and we get the index. Index is basically the order of the question. So here I'm going to return an object like this, and I'm going to do text. It should be equals to key dot text. Also, we have the form ID, sending that as well. And we have also the order. Order, it should be equals to index like this. As you can see, we get this error type. So let's try to fix that. The key should be have text, and the text it should be string. And also the index, it should be just a number. So now what we're going to do is let's just return the updated form. Just like that. Let's save that. Let's try to make an update. Here, I just want to refresh everything. And now let's try to open the a network and see what happened when I update the form. So first, what I'm going to do is let's change the title here to update, right? And also the question 1, I'm going to change that to update, and then just remove the question 4. So now we just have 3 questions with this update and with this update right here as well. So let's try to send the update form. So as you can see now, the title is have update, and also we just have 3 questions. And as you can see, the first question have update as well. And now it means we successfully update the form. Really, really cool. So let's try to update again, maybe. Let's try to remove the update text on the title. Let's try to update that. Now, as you can see, that's gone. So to make sure this works, let's try to log in with another account. I'm going to click sign out for the Chandev account here. And let's try to, as you can see, if I go to dashboard, for example, it will redirect me to the, basically to the sign in. If I click that, it will redirect me to the sign in. Here we go. And so now let's try to log in with Google, another Google account. And here we go. As you can see, all the total response is basically 0 for now. If I click this one, it should be say no form found, and etc. If I go back again, as you can see, I can create form. So now let's try to create form in here. I'm going to do employee feedback form for the title, and for the description, just put the text right here. Great. So for the first question, I'm going to do you feel value at work? Right, and let's add another question. I'm going to do this question right here. What is one thing you would change in the workplace? Also, let's try to do another thing. The question here, this is basically question 3. Great. So now let's try to create the form. And as you can see, the toast notification is shown, and now we on the detail. And as you can see, we can just basically share the form right here. As you can see, now there is no responses. So now let's try to open a browser, and I just want to paste that like this. So let's try to submit the value here. For the name, I'm not gonna send any name, and for the email, I'm not gonna send any email because this is just optional field. For the first question, I'm gonna say yes. And for the second one, I'm gonna say more flexible working hours. For the third one, I'm gonna do excellent. Great. So now let's submit the form. As you can see, response submitted. And then we still get a 0 in here, but if I refresh it, of course it will update it. As you can see, we have the view response 1. If I click that, we see the response, right? This is from the anonymous response basically. If I go back to dashboard, and all the field here will be coming 1, 1, and I can click view all forms, and here we go. All right, so I think that's it guys for this video. Hope you learned a lot of things. And of course, you can just create your own form builder. You can put this as a SAS maybe, and whatever you want. So I want to put all the code on the description. Thank you so much for watching. See you guys on the next one.